Ready? All right. Good evening. This is the April 7th monthly meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. It is now called to order. My name is Mimi Love. I'm the chair of the commission, and I'd like to thank the commissioners for donating their time, sharing their valuable insights, and shaping the city of Boston into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all of its citizens. We're pleased to be meeting in a hybrid format with commissioners in the room and attending virtually. We will do a roll call and let you know who's in the room and who is virtual in a moment. The open meeting law requires I notify the public this meeting is being recorded. And a reminder to all in attendance, the proponents' presentations will be posted to the Project Planning Department's webpage, and a recording of tonight's proceedings will be posted in the City of Boston's YouTube channel page. They should be posted by the end of this week. So, commissioners present, please say present as I call your name. Danelle Choi, who's with us tonight. Linda Eastley, I believe, is also not with us tonight. Diana Fernandez. Present. In person, Jonathan Garland.
Present.
Joining us virtually, Shauna Gillis-Smith. Present. Person. Commissioner Hasteen, I believe, is not with us this evening. Confirmed. Kathy Kotorides, not with us. Anne-Marie Lubenow. Present. In person, David Manfredi.
Present.
Catherine Morris.
Should be joining in a little while.
Okay. David Nagahiro.
Present.
David joining us virtually. Laura Solano. Laura, I know you're here with us. Do we have your phone working? We'll try to problem solve that in the background, but she is with us virtually tonight. And Kirk Sykes.
Present.
Great. And myself, Mimi Love. So with that, we have quorum. Commissioners, I need a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 3rd, full monthly meeting minutes. On the 3rd, we had Design Subcommittee B on February 24th, Design Subcommittee Meeting A meeting minutes on the 24th, and Subcommittee B meeting minutes on the 24th. Do I have a motion to approve? And a second? Excellent. So I'm going to call those present. Jonathan Garland.
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Yes.
Anne-Marie Lubenow.
Yes.
David Manfredi.
Yes.
David Nagahiro.
Yes.
Laura Solano. He's going to try to recall, so we'll continue. Kirk Sykes.
Yes.
Myself, Mimi Love. So the meeting minutes are approved. All right. So we have a report from the review committee. Before I pass it along, a reminder that as of January 1st, 2026, BCDC accepts live public comments only at project introductions. Tonight, we do have one project that will be introduced, and we will take public comments on 45 Townsend Street. The other two projects in front of the commission tonight for review and final recommendation, Longwood Place Phase 1 and West End Library, will not be taking any live public comments. Members of the public who wish to submit comments are encouraged to do so in writing by emailing them to bcdc@boston.gov at any phase of the project review. Comments will be sent to commissioners before the next scheduled meeting on a specific project. With that, I think I'm going to pass over our report from review committee for 45 Townsend Street. It's in Roxbury.
Thank you, Mimi. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Seth Reisman, Deputy Director of Design at the City of Boston Planning Department and Executive Director of BCDC. Tonight, we have one project for your consideration to review. A proposed project at 45 Townsend Street in Roxbury is seeking an Article 80B entitlement. It includes approximately 211,000 square feet of primarily residential uses, which is approximately 164 residential units, in a combination of adaptively reused and newly constructed buildings, 124 vehicular parking spaces, and approximately 96,000 square feet of new and improved open space on a 4.85 acre site previously occupied by Radius Special Hospital, and before that by the Jewish Memorial Hospital and Rehabilitation Center. The proposed project has been developed in compliance with the underlying zoning of the project site. Note that a previous version of the project was submitted to the city as a PNF on July 12, 2017. IAG public and DCDC review commenced, but the project was subsequently paused in 2021. The currently proposed project was submitted to the city as a supplemental filing on January 30th, 2026. Given the extent of design changes since this was last viewed by the Planning Department and the Commission, the project is being reintroduced to DCDC. Planning Department held an Impact Advisory Group meeting on March 3rd and a public meeting on March 4th, 2026. The Planning Department staff hosted a public review committee meeting on March 30th, 2026, and recommends that the Commission vote to review the proposed project.
Commissioners, we need a motion to review the project. So moved. A second?
Second.
I'm going to call on every one of you. Jonathan Garland,
Yes.
Donna Gillis-Smith,
Recused.
Anne-Marie Lubenow,
Yes.
David Manfredi,
Yes.
Holly-Ann Catherine Morris, if she's joined us yet. If not, David Nagahiro,
Yes.
Laura Solano, Burke Sykes,
Yes.
and Mimi Love. Do we have enough votes? We do. Well, we're short one.
Well, for quorum, we have.
We have, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. We will be reviewing the introduction to that project later this evening.
And sorry to interrupt, but to Laura, no, unfortunately, we can't hear you, Laura.
Laura now, ability to, if she clicks on her audio,
On the phone, you mean?
within her call, she can click call in, and that should let her directly, rather than calling it separately, having the emergency like that, if she read those instructions. I would write them down in the chat.
I think, let's try that.
So Laura,
We
if
still
you,
have enough quorum.
if you call in to the line, to the phone number, you might get a direct connection. I don't know if she heard that, but she was there.
Lizzie will put instructions in the chat, Laura.
Okay, should we continue? All right, so moving on to presentation for final review and recommendation. We're going to start with Longwood Place Phase 1. This will be the 5th presentation of the proposed project to the Commission following its introduction on May 6th, 2025. It's had 3 monthly meetings, design subcommittees, with the most recent one being on March 24th of 2026. We had Commissioners Gillis-Smith, Haseen, Coderitas, Nagahiro, and Solano were at the March 24th design subcommittee. And we have 3 commissioners that are recused, Manfredi, Garland, and Sykes. Commissioner Manfredi is leaving the room, and we ask Commissioners Garland and Sykes to turn off your camera while we proceed the discussion. The Planning Department staff that has been managing this project includes Jill Zeich, Hernan Schlossman, Yvonne G., and Scott Slarsky. I think some of you are in the room. Poet, thank you. And we will pass it on to the proponent to present.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Tonight, we're going to show you a review of our process to date and an update since the project introduction a year ago on May 6th. And then we're also going to show you some more recent updates.
just 2 weeks ago at the subcommittee. We're going to go through each of our project components like we typically do. There are 3 buildings as well as landscape architecture. Our project introduction was again May 6, 2025. And in the middle of our subcommittee process, we had a sort of a pause to respond to requests for supplemental information from the city, which we did in February, and then had a subsequent series of 4 public meetings. And saw you all again 2 weeks ago at subcommittee meeting. As a reminder, this project is the Longwood Place Phase 1. It is 3 of a total of 5 buildings that were approved as part of the approved PDA in 2023. And we just wanted to show a reminder of some of those PDA design guidelines, which have been our touchstone for the design of these buildings as we've shown you throughout this BCDC process.
So first of all, we're going to start with the landscape architecture. My name is Philip Dugdale. I'm a landscape architect and principal at Sasaki. Overall, the comments have been positive. The reactions have been mostly been around how the scale and proportions of each of the elements related to one another, and how the landscape can create a sequential kind of sense of discovery on the site as a whole. You'll see here the comments that we received before on the May 6th meeting, and then since the subcommittee number 3 a couple of weeks ago. We'll go through each of these as we kind of go through the presentation. So here you'll see that May 2025 site plan, all the different spaces from the main heart, the River Gateway, the Pocket Plaza, and the central connector through the whole site. And here in the next slide, you'll see how that plan has evolved. If you click back and forth just a couple of times, just to kind of see, a lot of the open space has kind of improved green space. There's a lot more kind of consolidation of each of the zones, and generally kind of really created more of an experiential green space within the main heart. If we step into
could you hand 1 second? Okay, great. Yeah, that's what we do. Could we put the Zoom heads on the side?
I think it's good. So to begin with the main heart, some of the major changes have been the reconfiguration of the lawn. We've strengthened visual connections to each of the architectural gateways and elements. We've consolidated a lot of the area around the forum, and we've designed a front porch to incorporate an informal stage area that really creates a complementary approach between the architecture and the landscape. Overall, the green space has increased by 20%, and the lawn itself, the framed lawn has increased by 48% from the PNF. And these sections here, we also took on board some of the comments from the commissioners in the last meeting of how we can really accentuate that kind of bowl-like experience with topography. You'll see here the front porch steps down into the heart itself to kind of transition from the retail edge of the R1 building. And then within the planters along the edge of the heart, we'll accentuate that with topography to create that kind of bowl-like feature. Here between the Pocket Plaza, between the R1 and the C2 building, you'll see that much greener pocket, that much greener space. Here we also create that kind of transitionary edge between Pilgrim with that topography to kind of create a sense of arrival as you arrive in the site. Under the front porch from the meeting a couple of weeks ago, we've shortened that back bench to make a much more open space, much more open feeling to that space. We've expanded the stage and the pebble around the column, and then also introduced a strip of textured split-face cobble pavers that acts as a delineation for cane detection underneath the column itself. Along the connector, one other comment was to consolidate a lot of the spaces together. So we consolidated the water feature to the north of the connector, and then replaced some of the water elements with pebble seating, so that it felt much more like a it maximizes that element to one kind of feature. And here you'll see that view. This is from this C1 is on the left, C2 is on the right. That idea of the pebble water feature kind of at the gateway, which is similar to what's happening within the heart. And so to unify the whole site, we come back to the heart. This is where all the different elements come together. There's a really kind of thoughtful attention to detail of materiality of the open space, really thinking about how we can create a series of gathering elements and using different varieties of seating elements so people can face each other, people can sit along the edge of the space, but also kind of come together. And so we'll move through the site. Here we're at the entrance of the main heart, looking back towards the LMA. The idea is that it draws you into the open space. And this view is along Brookline and looking at R1, and behind them, C1 to the right. You'll see that will bring activity to the open space and this idea of this kind of green threshold within the heart itself. As you move towards the entrance from the LMA, here you'll see the R1 to the left. The idea is that the gathering zone really draws you in. The trees and the grove of trees acts as an inviting space to draw you into the open space, but the activity of R1, C2, and C1 all kind of creates an active edge. As you move through the heart itself, this is kind of set on the framed lawn. This is a space that you can come and people watch, but creating a more of a kind of a quiet zone to visit. As we move through the site, this is the front porch, and you'll see where the gathering grove next to the C1 forum really connects with each other. So there's the interior and exterior of open space, and then under the R1, the informal kind of seating zone of the retail of that building. As you, again, moving a little bit further away, looking back into the heart here, you'll see that kind of really active edge looking back at that green buffer towards the LMA. So the idea here is to really draw you into these spaces, create a green frame around Brookline, and really create an inviting open space. One of the big comments was to draw some of the elements that were originally in the PNF in the heart into other areas. So this is the space between R1 and C2. This is a quiet reflective space with hammocks along the main circulation path. And in here we end back at the connector, which you'll see the relationship between all of the three buildings. This does show the water feature on the ground plane that has now become a seating pebble, because this is the previous rendering. But overall, this shows how they all come together in a unified site.
Okay, we're going to move on to the building design update. And when we saw you last year, when we saw you on May 6th at the project introduction, we really wanted us to look at how to find the right balance of architectural diversity, but also a cohesion and a sense of place and a sense of unified identity. So we worked a lot to refine that and also find more opportunities along the way to amplify that. And so our overarching design thesis really revolves around these primary principles. It's about creating a network of open spaces, like Philip just showed. It's about looking at each of the bases of the building and finding something in common in the way that they touch the ground architecturally, but also in program. They're all listed, and they all invite the public in and around them. We also want to create an invitation into the site with view corridors in the way that these buildings move and turn away from each other, to have the light and air and sky between the buildings. And finally, a harmonious composition where the buildings talk to each other, but are also legible in terms of their use and how they fit into the context of the LMA. Just one more layer here is this sort of almost unconscious layer of identity or cohesion, but it's about having the same glazing specification and very cohesive and consistent palettes, in that they are. This is a team of 4 architectural teams working together, selecting materials at the same time in a way that makes sense together.
Great.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Emily. Go ahead to the next slide. So I think Emily and Phil gave you a good sense of the overall composition. Focusing on C1, first starting with the site plan. I think the first thing that you'll notice, C1's plan south anchors all the kind of major spaces, the connector on the top, the heart, have a nice conversation with the front porch. and then a lobby entrance off the mid-street or mid-block street. Also note the addition of the Vicolo, which is a kind of a secret pathway that you discover as you work your way from Brookline back to Pilgrim Road. The comments that we received really fell into two buckets. First bucket was to look at the facade, the fenestration, and the ask was, it's looking a little bit vertical, readjust it, reweave it so it's a bit more horizontal. I think the board in general looked at the diagonal expression and said, can you calm the ends of the buildings down? And there was also a really good observation about the V columns pulling the storefront back to allow enough space around that. And then finally, in addition to that, adding some extra views for the Vicolo. So a series of before and after. This is the broad view of Brookline, the original facade. You can see that vertical character in the diagonals. Next one, a little bit more of a horizontal and vertical weave that calms things down, and the elimination of the diagonals. Next, a view looking along Brookline again. There you see the diagonals. Next view, taking those off to kind of calm the facade and really wrap the ends more, so it's a little less of a kind of a shear between the sides and the ends. Next, a view of the lobby, which kind of anchors the corner of the mid-block road in Brookline. You see the pedestrian activity along Brookline, complete transformation of that storefront. The cuts and angles marking the Vicolo mid-block. Next slide. The original Vicolo, you can see the proximity of the columns to the storefront. Next slide. Pulling the storefront back, allowing for a bit more room, reimagining the patterning of the soffit so that it has a little bit more of a dialogue with R1. Beth made a note about the connection between the soffit, the ceiling, and the storefront. I think maybe Commissioner Love mentioned that, so we do need to take a look at that. This view within the Vicolo showing the activity on both sides, the gentle topography leading you back to the connector, operability, porosity. The Vicolo kind of starts large, compresses down, and then expands back out as you get to the connector, as seen here. P2 in the distance with an entrance to their lobby. Next slide. And then coming just to the edge of the connector, peeking through, Anna will show you this view later as well, a little bit more of that story of how you meander through the Pocket Park into Pilgrim. A detail of the storefront, this idea of creating a couple of special days so that each retailer can have an area to customize while the rest of the composition stays kind of controlled and unified. And then finally, a view from the Pocket Park. This is a really important corner, operability into the Forum, which is a great public space. The building lifts up to mark a taller height, again, to have a nice dialogue with the Heart and with R1. And with that, I'll pass it to Anna.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna Ishevsky, Design Director at KPF, and I'm going to walk you through the transformation that C2 has undergone during the BCDC process, and also share some new materials regarding the Pilgrim experience as requested during the March 24th meeting. As a quick reminder, C2 is located on the Pilgrim Road side of the site, and it houses the ramp for the entire project. And by doing so, it allows us to keep the rest of the ground floor fully programmable for other activities. In terms of the overall building character, we really went through some major transformations from where we started originally during the entitlement process. We adjusted the facade character, we reduced the depth of the cantilevers to have minimal steps to minimize the effect on the Heart. And we ultimately landed with what we're showing now, which is option 6. In this view, looking from Brookline, you can start to see the impact of this adjusted facade reading. On the left is the early building articulation. You can see the large flat surfaces on both ends of the building originally. And to the right is the current approach with a wraparound subtle grid that helps to kind of reduce the dominance of these walls and ultimately helps C2 fit better into its context. Looking from the river view, you can see the early version again. Here we had a vertical articulation. We were picking up some of the materiality from the contract, but the scale wasn't working out quite well. And this is where we are now. We introduced these periodical breaks that helped us to align the scale of the building better to the contract. We kept the facade really simple and restrained and created a dialogue with a scale of R1. At the ground plane, we're looking for articulation that kind of helps us to establish pedestrian scale and create permeability by opening up that corner as a portal between the different spaces. Generally, the design language helps us to kind of reinforce continuity on all four sides of the building, and we'll kind of go through a quick overview. This is looking back from the heart. You can see the chamfered corner and the two-story reading, helping us create a more comfortable edge in relationship to the heart, and also have a better dialogue with C1. Next. This is a view looking from Mid-Block Road towards the main entry, giving the building a clear front door. Diving quickly into Pilgrim Road. So in essence, right now, it's a quiet street with a mix of residential and university buildings, along with a significant amount of back-of-house activity. In our master plan, we offer multiple through connections to Brookline, as well as a pocket plaza and some street furniture. Architecturally, see-through facade is defined by these strong piers that's tied directly to the language of the building above. We want to maintain that consistency, and while we're continuing to refine the requirements for each of the mechanical spaces that will be housed along the facade. Next. Regardless of those requirements, the goal is to make sure that we maintain a clean, organized, and intentional expression using architectural screens and louvers as required. Next. This is a view of the Pilgrim Street directly across from where the future C2 will be. And in the next view here, you can see this with our building. Again, the rhythm of these piers echoes Boston University's building across the street, and we think generally creates a very comfortable environment. Next. The north corner provides a release from those mechanical spaces with a green buffer, a space for bike parking, and some benches. This is a close-up of that condition. The perforated screen behind the bike parking is air intake for the garage. The architectural screen behind the bench is just open air for the gas meter. So there's no exhaust at the pedestrian level, so those spaces will be comfortable for occupancy and kind of pedestrians walking by. And lastly, here you can see the south corner of the Pilgrim facade and how all the building elements, the slight stepping of the massing, the vertical reveals, the gridded facade, and the rhythm of the piers come together to create this very rational and expressive building. And with that, we'll go to R1.
So the residential building R1 is the smaller footprint on the site that you see here, as Philip explained. There's a part of it that engages with the main heart, and also a part that with the more near street wall on Pilgrim Road. Since May 6th, you've asked us to, there have been some smaller comments on the tower, but you really asked us to look at the front porch, make sure that it's cohesive, that it is designed in a way that's holistic, and that it's clear. As a reminder, this is how the master of the building has developed since the PDA. The PDA design guidelines do suggest that there is a front porch in the project, but as you can see, we've sculpted that as we've gone through to something that's more lifted and with an element that makes a very welcoming gesture in the site. So here's what you saw at the project introduction in May of 2025. Since then, I'll talk about the tower first and then go to the front porch. We've introduced more defined, clear, thinner piers. We'll just kind of toggle back and forth, as well as the darker metal to help with contrast and make the building feel more elongated and a little bit lighter. That was one of the comments that we received throughout our time with you. Zooming into the front porch, we started out with what we ultimately believed was too strong of a metaphorical gesture with the columns, and have since developed the front porch into a language that's more clear. The materiality is more cohesive. The gesture is more authentic to what the actual structural load path of the building might be. And since subcommittee a couple of weeks ago, you asked us to go even further and look at the again, make sure that the space is holistic architecturally, particularly with the elevation of R1 here. And so we reintroduced a brick spandrel so that there's a visual understanding of what holds the tower. We have reset this volume of the building to make this vertical read even stronger. And we have cleaned up a lot of the architectural elements on the storefront, some of the metal panel and projections, to have a more cleaner, unified gesture there.
Emily, just over a minute left.
Okay. We've been really intentional about the ceiling and how we might integrate lighting, and we know that placemaking is incredibly important here, programming rather. And Philip talked about this a little bit, but we've also looked a lot at the landscape architecture and how to make a graduated stepping down from the front porch into the front part. It's very important as the grading elements of the site. And along the riverway, we've made a small, subtle refinement along the, mostly with the consistency of the material palette, as well as some of these horizontal datum lines that connect and throughout the site. And finally, along Pilgrim Road, looking at that, looking at the important nature of the street wall here, softer gestures and opening into the site, transparency at the lobby. And finally, Commissioner Nagahiro asked us to look at incorporating even more metal into this elevation, which we have tried here. We have a study. We don't feel that it makes the building stronger, but we wanted to respond to that and have a chance to review it. And with that, very much for your time.
All right, so commissioners,
If I could interrupt before we
Yes.
turn it over to the commissioners, want to mention that the planning department did receive one public comment letter directly addressed to the commission between the last subcommittee and this evening, and this was shared with the commission earlier today. Also want to confirm that Commissioner Solano can hear us, and we can hear her. Laura? I think you're on mute. Okay, but you can hear us. Okay. And while you're trying to figure that out, I also noticed that Commissioner Morris joined. Catherine?
Hello and good afternoon, people.
Thank you, Catherine. Good to hear your voice. And let's see if we can maybe try to unmute Laura, Lizzie. And while we continue to troubleshoot that, maybe keep
okay,
going.
all right.
We do have a physical model, so I welcome those that are here in
Yes,
person to
yes,
walk around and take a look.
Absolutely. I think what we could do is, just as a reminder, I'll just say that Commissioners Garland, these are the recused ones. Gillis Smith, Hassan, Coderitas, Nagahira, and Solano were at the March 24th Design Subcommittee meeting. We don't have Commissioners Hassan or Coderitas with us this evening. Commissioner Solano is having a little bit of technical difficulty. So it puts a lot of pressure on Commissioner Gillis Smith and Nagahira to at least get us going. But we have others, obviously, commissioners who can comment, and we should look at the model, those present in the room.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Architects, I welcome you to make any comment.
I'm just, with phase two, it's like, oh.
I know you have to remember. interesting noticing the Tables too, the connector.
Yeah, this is, in terms of scale,
Right.
seeing how small
Right.
it is here,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know.
Thank you for your presentation. I haven't had a chance to see, I was not part of the subcommittee reviews. This is my first time seeing it in a while, and it's come a long way. I wondered if the team could talk a little bit more about, and maybe share some examples on the slides and presentations about your approach to creating a harmonious whole. And actually, even before that, what is the phasing for the implementation of this? What will happen in what order and by whom?
Russ, you want to take the phasing question?
Yeah, I mean, phase one is obviously these three buildings. We'd like to retain the flexibility to pick and choose. My guess right now is that we will get the one big tenant for one of the two commercial buildings. And once we have that, we build the entirety of the garage with the R1 building and whichever first commercial building. Part of that is the garage necessitates,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you do the entire garage first and then you pick which building you go with. The nature of the R1 building is such that it basically wouldn't support a demob and a mob just for the one building. So I anticipate you do one commercial building and the R1 building at the same time. We have agreed with the city that effectively whichever building that is, you kind of think of all of the public realm from the mid-block road all the way down to the border with Windsor as being produced with that first building, whichever building it is. So all of the public realm, the parks that go with that, all of the stuff along Pilgrim and along Brookline that goes with that, it all goes with the, we're asking the city to consider them. It all will look the way it looks on screen once phase one is completed in its entirety. If we have to leave one building out for some further period of time, you know, the connectors and directly next to that building and the access for construction, it would not make sense to do that in its finished condition just to not be destroyed in any process.
And given what you know now, understanding there are a lot of things that are beyond your control, what do you anticipate is the timeline for completing that phase? And also, what are the anticipated tenants? This is the residential business, correct? Yeah.
So
What are
if I had to, you know, put a paycheck on it, I think this is a significant research, medical, or not, lab research with a component of one of the hospitals in this building. I anticipate this one goes first along with our one. That's my guess.
But for what time? Like just.
So the construction timeline, all in, 4 to 5 years. We're trying to get it to 4, but right now 5 is the best.
Based on what we know now.
Yeah. So complete, you know, dig in the hole for the garage and then completion of the whole building, 5 years. And R1 would fit within that. R1 is a 3-year timeline maximum.
For the sake of the commissioners on the call, are there any photos of this model in the back of your appendix or anything that we could just flash? And if there's not, it's okay.
I don't think we brought photos in our appendix. They are in some of our previous presentations. I could pull those up on the side while you're.
That might be just, you know, emergency thing for that.
And this model is not a recent model, right? This doesn't represent the.
No, there's been changes.
There are changes.
Yeah.
General mapping.
For the breaking is, C1, right?
Yeah.
Your question about what did we do to try to unify it and make it more of a district? I think Emily's slide there did a good job of kind of starting the conversation. The first thing is that you look, all the buildings are lifted a bit to open up the ground plane, to make it feel more porous, more welcoming. All the buildings in some way or another angle or facet, and for the most part, those angles are meant to increase the sense of the whole open space inviting you in. So cuts and angles in all of these buildings obviously inform the overall massing, but their real purpose was to make the ground plane and the public realm more welcoming. I think as you look at the model, the other thing to keep in mind is there was a P&A that established the basic organization of two parallel buildings.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I would mention about the model is I know there have been a lot of comments about this juncture. Keep in mind that at some point in the future, C3, the idea is that there is a kind of a winter garden that connects through. So I think that piece will make that space more interesting, and I think it will reinforce that kind of linear.
There's a terminus to it, that's right.
Right.
And a way to kind of continue.
But no, go ahead and.
Then I should let, so I think my question has more to do with the architecture of the buildings. I understand there's some massing decisions, some major kind of massing or sculpting decisions. It has more to do with the texture and architecture of the buildings, and frankly also the relationship between the buildings and the landscape. We saw a lot of detailed imagery about the landscape, but the buildings are broader brush moves, and also the relationship between what you're creating here, which is a new district and ensemble, which again is a remarkable opportunity for anyone, but then how these relate to what's around them and the character, the general character of the community.
And I do wonder if you guys could speak to that a little bit, because Anne Marie, these are some questions we had when we were engaging and first started to see these concepts come in. And I think the team has responded a little bit to sort of how the buildings respond to the Brookline Ave, right? And the sort of material palette associated with the LMA and some of these larger institutional buildings which have a much lighter palette. And then how we're responding to the riverway, right, and the fence, where you see more of the brick articulation and some of the red elements come through with some of the Windsor buildings that have this sort of like burgundy color to it. So I'd love for you guys to sort of speak a little bit to, I think, that articulation, because they are sort of playing off of both sides in many ways.
In a way, we always thought of C2 as a building that kind of bridges the two. Because, right, like C1 is facing Longwood, it has a certain scale, it has a certain character. And for us, this building is facing the park, and buildings that are a lot smaller in scale and just have a lot more masonry. So I think we really use that opportunity to obviously try and have a comfortable dialogue with C1, but really scale back to the scale of R1. And then some of these linear datums were established in order to bring down the scale of the overall mapping to the program and the scale of the park.
I think to reply to that, to what Arnold was saying. These are some of the studies that Stan, maybe you're referring to, that we looked at early on in the project about how to make this ensemble very clearly connect to its context, or connecting to the data that exists in the context.
Whether C1 goes first or C2 goes first, for a period of time, at least C1, as you're coming down Brookline, it's going to be a real marker. And in some ways, we are conscious of the dialogue between those two buildings.
And even this newer building coming online, where you see many of them sort of darker metals coming through, and I think that was a piece of feedback we shared in the beginning as staff, which was maybe we lighten some of the metal here to, have a transition more into sort of the limestones that really dominate more of the LMA. And I think the team, in your latest renderings, are responding a little bit to that.
So the one thing I wanted to talk about, the cohesiveness, because I actually do see, the same issue in looking from above, but I do want to talk about the cohesiveness that I find at the ground level from the landscape, because
I was going to recommend we pull up a site plan, and I think we should talk about the open space ground floor, and then let's go to each building now that we've kind of grounded the conversation on how are these buildings tied. If we could do that, because you were at the last design subcommittee.
But
going on.
I actually don't want to start with the plan just yet, because I want to talk about one of the things that some of the views, Emily, from eye level of the different buildings around the heart, because one thing that I think is quite interesting at the ground level is that each of the buildings in some way is kind of, in my reading, being somewhat anthropomorphic and tree-like, and not in sort of a you know, a pastiche way. Even C1, you know, the sort of carving of the columns, more the architecture ones right now, Emily, I'm talking about, and then well, you know, the one of the Forum, the one of C1 at the corner, the one of, you know, the R1, just really talking about the different, you know, knowing they're different places, so that's why I think it's hard to see. But I do think that is quite an, you know, I think it's an exciting expression, actually, that each of these buildings is taking on in a very abstract way, that the edges are faceted, so it's not only that you get kind of the view of a tree-like thing, but you can move in between the buildings and the structure in an interesting way, along with a lot of sort of abundant tree planting. So I think that at the ground level, the experience is when I first saw the project, I didn't think that, but as it developed along, it seemed to get both simpler and richer, the experience. And so I think even the moves between the last meeting and now.
What I find to see as a visual disconnect between the site plan and these models is the shaping of the ground floor, and this is why I wanted to go to the site plan, really reduces that length of, you know, that courtyard in plan, which we're not seeing in the model. And I do think that there's some experience down at eye level that would be quite different than us, you know, being at bird's eye level, seeing just these buildings from on top. That central connector isn't as tight and linear of a space as it reads in this model.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because well, part of it is because at least C1 is pulling back from the, you know, the columns are aligned with the edge of the building, where the facades are pulled back.
Has the shape of the building of C1 changed since this plan, or?
The change has actually been pretty minor, mostly at this end to make this a bit more narrower, and then just refining some of those spring points to align more with either R1 or C1. And just one other comment. Beyond what Mimi just mentioned, what's happening in plan in terms of chamfering the building, at least in C1, and I think in some really important points on the edge of building, there's also something that's happening a bit in section, because it's kind of cutting up at an angle. So when you stand there, there'd be interesting moments where the surface kind of reaches out to invite lighting.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to mention the other aspect sort of related to that is that the soffit, that there's attention to significant soffit, which is an interesting way of thinking it. And I was wondering, even in C2, in sort of the subtle, rational way, if there might be some, you know, some thinking about what that underside of the soffit around the heart is in the way that it is on the other building. In C2, the approach to soffits was also kind of derived from the expression that was established volumetrically at the edge. So we brought that language both here, then down to the chamfered corner, and then to the connector. So there's a certain consistency of kind of materiality that relates to the rest of the building. But we've been in dialogue a lot in terms of what is the right relationship for all the soffits, both C2 to C1, and then back to R1, because I think every building is kind of trying to solve for a set of issues, and we're a little bit more to go there. But the conversation is very much happening. I think volumetrically we appreciate what it creates for the space, but I think in terms of actual articulation, we're getting there. And I think also with seeing the model really is putting a ton of pressure and questioning on this building, because it doesn't, you know, the plan is much better, you know, the views, and then seeing the tightness, all of a sudden this becomes a really long space again. And there's then the concern about wind that wasn't, apparently the wind issue within the corridor that we all expected is not really an issue. But the wind issue was more at the ends, right? So then it makes me sort of wonder what's going to happen
in that in the next phase.
One, and that comment too, and I know this is not what we're reviewing, but makes me want to take this one down and sort of let this be the foreground and these be the background. So just thinking again a little bit of how this becomes an ensemble. I appreciate what you're doing at the ground plane. I'm just looking at in turn, and I realize we're not, you know, as people, we're not going to be seeing the bird's eye view, but I also just am, that this model to me is very telling in terms of what is articulated by the other existing buildings in terms of how massing relates to each other, how certain buildings, like I actually think the landmarks in our 401 park, you know, that to me begins to speak a little bit out of an ensemble, and then the tower, and it just seems to me this is an opportunity. This feels a little forced because it is trying to be the foreground, the object, and then it's a very tight circumstance. And I do appreciate what you've done with these. I can definitely see that. It's just where I understand what you're doing at the ground plane. I'm just trying to see it in the architecture a few stories up in that kind of mid-range. And it's also, and I know my colleagues know this, we see a lot of glass buildings right now. My question is always, how do we know this is in Longwood and not the Seaport or not Kendall Square? And I think that is your opportunity for architectural expression and identity.
And I think too, something, Anne Marie, this model is just short of our latest approval, right, with the cancer hospital.
Yeah, I was thinking about
and there
that,
is
yeah.
some relationship there, right, around what that is introducing in terms of how it's hitting Brookline, the sort of fenestration details, there's a lot there that can be done, even with just glass and frit, that can, I think, soften some of the elements here.
I agree. I want to invite the commissioners on the call to also participate. We absolutely have this model, which is a helpful tool for us in the room, but maybe we can also open it up to commissioners. So feel free to raise your hand. I'm trying to follow along. And you can ask the proponent team to put the slide on any one of, the topics you'd like to discuss.
These corners are left.
I'm not seeing any comments. I'm happy to jump in. Should we just go, and then I was really just taking notes. I'm going to leave the landscape comments to our landscape, commissioners, architectural commissioners. But if we could just go to C1, I think the thing I'm struggling with C1 is there's a couple of things. The whole guiding principle for this project is that you have a two-story high, expression consistently along all three buildings. And with C1, you do it everywhere except the Vigolo. And it's really a compressed space. And I know that you're, have technical issues that you're dealing with a transformer, X, Y, and Z, but that is almost your most important space, which you are denying your guiding principle. So I think is there something that you could do, and if you can get to those interior, expressions, there's something that you could do to think about, you might have to compress in the middle, but if there's any more real estate we could get to get that reading to be stronger or be a little bit lighter, I encourage you to continue to look at that. And I know you're wrestling with the transformer location X, Y, and Z.
And that, the first slide that I showed you showed that ground plan that was completely open. It's either all retail or the forum or the lobby. Part of the reason we're able to do that is we took all the stuff that's usually supposed to be on the first floor, we put it up on the second floor. The second part of it is, in order to make that cut through that parcel and through that building, it's located between shear walls and between the two elevator banks. So it's kind of picking up a narrow slot, which I think is kind of cool. I've always envisioned the Vigolo as this thing that you kind of discover. You get a glimpse of it. So what's that? I want to walk through there. I think we can look at, so what it does now is it's sort of horizontal and then reaches up at the two ends. Maybe another move to kind of soften that break to kind of add a little bit more volume.
Right.
But the amount we can cut is fairly limited because at the end of the day, you don't want to split that second floor plan in half completely.
No, I understand that. And I don't know exactly where it gets compressed in plan. From the perspective, it feels like it's more in the center of the plan. And I would leverage the higher height along Brookline Avenue and then have it be more compressed towards Central Connector, if that's an option. Yeah, I don't know that having it raised up at the Central Connector is as important or equal. So that's just a comment. And then just to stay with that second floor base, the expression of the tower and these strong, V columns coming down, the tree analogy that, was being referenced here, it's such a strong idea. It's almost too strong in itself that I recommend you thinking about that storefront really being more simple. I almost want to see like an Apple Store glass front, like it almost goes away. And that transparency through the central connector is imagined or more, the expression of the horizontals and the spandrels, it just seems to me a little bit more than it needs to be. And could that just be more transparent and more, the idea of visually connecting all the way through wants to be emphasized there in my mind.
I would imagine if you look at, we don't have visuals, kind of the surrounding context, but from what I imagine, it is more likely to be vertical in terms of the historic, when you kind of look at the rhythm, the expressions. I think that seems a little contradictory. So that's the way without changing your materials, but thinking about how do you respond to the context, could also address the comment. And also I think the idea of raising the entry, your most public entrance is off of Brookline. Like that's the most distinctive building. That really is your gateway to this space, this public realm that you're creating. Let it celebrate that rather than minimize it.
So maybe I should just say the last couple of things and then I can hand it over to the other colleagues. So first of all, I actually don't have very much more to say about the landscape because I think you did such a good job for the last meeting that I do think the idea, the comments that, and you have been very responsive all the way through, I think, but I think that the simplification of the connector, of the consolidating of the open spaces, of turning the water features into pebbles, which fits a lot better with the landscape that you're creating in front of R1. So it's, moving along. I think that is working well. And I think, as I said the last time, it's gotten calmer and richer, the whole experience. The thing I was quite concerned about last meeting was the Pilgrim, moving to C1 was the Pilgrim experience. And so maybe, Emily, can we go to some of that? And I really do appreciate a number of the moves along Pilgrim. I think that having the seating along with the bike area, the green planting on either edge, and I do think that the spacing that the screens and columns are extremely elegant. In this particular view, it looks like there's something sort of artistic happening on that screen at the end, and I'm hoping that that's the case, because I think even if the super rational, elegant, well-designed, handsome might get boring walking back and forth all the time. So a little bit of spice along that experience, I think would be, would help. And I said most of, and also I just wanted to say one comment about R1. I can't believe how significant bringing that brick spandrel back across the top has made to the experience of that. It's going from quite a complicated and disjointed to a kind of elegant experience. It also looks like you tweaked the columns too a little bit themselves. They seem, maybe it's just,
We did.
they're skinnier at the top.
Well, yeah, we actually heard it's color, so just to be,
color?
straightforward, but we heard that the color might have been a little bit dull, so we just wanted to reinforce that it's crisp and it's pale and it's.
Yeah, but I do think that also has made a big difference.
And Emily, did you push back the ground floor?
We pushed back the
Retail?
volume. We
Okay.
pushed this back probably about 2 feet, so to really let that vertical come through and feel that change of plainness.
I'm going to invite Laura Solano.
Yes,
Is that good? I mean, you can chime in too. Laura, you want to?
Sure. Let's stay right where we are. I appreciate what has happened with the columns underneath the residential building. I think it's so much more sleek and starts to have the same language as the other buildings, but distinct enough that it really stands out. So I appreciate that. Going to the central corridor, central connector, can you clarify whether or not there are still water features in the central connector? It's a little.
Yeah, it's just towards the northern gateway. In that last rendering, it was still showing the water feature just because that was an old rendering. But we are, if you see in this plan, what was the pebbles are now different paving or seating elements.
Yep, okay, good. Because I really think that those are unnecessary. I'd rather you spend that money on trees, bigger trees. So the other thing is, as you go forward, thinking about, again, I think I made the comment last time about how looking, I guess, northwest, the residential building kind of backs up and holds that corridor looking in that direction. But going in the other direction, I think I would still study the beefiness that you need in those planters and in those pebbles, just to make sure that you really do have kind of a similar weight. I don't know whether or not it's a scale thing or, you know, how close things are together or density, but I think that's something that still needs to be studied a little bit more. And you guys have had very little time to respond, so I'm confident that you'll do it. One thing that we haven't talked about much is the Riverway Gateway. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah,
and particularly where it's going to, because when you see it in the perspectives, et cetera, it looks like it's a walk to nowhere, but I may be wrong about that.
Yeah, so that obviously connects to the entry to Windsor School. So what we have, if you think about the section between Windsor and R1, we have, I think it's a 12-foot wide pathway. Then there's a two-way bike lane, and then there's a smaller residential kind of pathway that's near the bike storage and the entry to R1. So the idea is to kind of bring that bike lane, that two-way bike lane, up towards the Windsor School, and it's offset in a way to give a little bit of breathing room towards Windsor, and that's been kind of coordinated in collaboration with them.
Yeah, and Laura, just to add a little color here, that was a really important part of the PDA approval. When they got their master plan approval, the Windsor School had, as an abutter, some specific requests that the team has accommodated with that.
Great. Just a couple more questions. So along that corridor, and I'm just going to talk in colors, I understand the green is the bikeway. Going to the left of that, the tan, what is that material? Yeah, exactly.
That material, there's going to be the bike lane, and there's going to be a 5-foot wide tree buffer, and then that is pavement. So that will be the existing red brick edge that Windsor School already has against their building.
Okay. And I
Again,
wonder, sure, and I understand that. I'm not supposed to draw, but I have to. So is this planting, or is that also a hard surface?
That would be a hard surface.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you just want to maybe, you know, where that is, but I think the more that the scale of that kind of path and thinking about what you're going to see at this end, and maybe that greening up would help with that. So something to you know, continue to work on. Back to the front porch, I also appreciate how you sort of gave up on that secondary set of stairs that went up to the terrace that's right around the building. It feels so much more elegant now, and like you're really inviting people in. Like the difference between these two is really pretty. The column gets a place to come down to that I think is really successful. And then back to the Vicolo. If we could go to that perspective that shows. It's a musical instrument, isn't it? Yeah, the thing that I think Mimi's comment about the way that this is pressed down so quickly, right? I mean, you're talking about, you know, 5 steps, maybe even less, and you get to that compression. I think that's important, but one of the other things that I think is not doing you any favors is the texture of that calls attention to itself. So if it felt like it was a more simple surface that, you know, got some shadows on it and wasn't necessarily called out with, you know, the diagonals, the diamonds, you might want to consider that, because I know that you have a lot of constraints interior to that you know, aren't obvious to those of us reviewing this. And that's really it. I think you all have been so responsive, and I appreciate it a lot. And you've always done it in really clever and cooperative and collaborative ways. So it's going to be terrific.
David Nagahiro, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just make a few quick comments in that I know there's been a lot of scrutiny through the 5 different meetings. You know, I remember going back to the videos, the early ones, because I hadn't been on board at that point. But it was interesting to hear the conversation early on about how these buildings were all going to work together, and, you know, having 4 strong designers working together, I can imagine was not an easy task to find a common ground. And I think that's where the success has come with all of the comments and criticism that has come with the scrutiny through the questions. I think it's really evolved into something quite, you know, extraordinary. The comments of very subtle moves of the chamfering of all of the edges. Without that, I think it would be a very harsh place. And I think you've taken a lot of density and been able to allow these buildings to coexist in a very, you know, elegant way in how they start to shape those spaces and being able to see, daylight through those, portals, I think is essential. The idea of lifting the edges of each of the buildings, I think, has also been very, very effective. So, I think that has also helped with the perception of being able to, the porosity through the site. Emily, I do appreciate you tried that one detail where going darker. I do agree with you that it does feel lighter the way you have it currently. So thank you for trying that. And I do appreciate that the two buildings, that C1, C2, are able to coexist comfortably. I think that was probably one of the greatest challenges I found with the size and scale of those two buildings being next to each other. But I think allowing one to be a little bit more prominent and the other one to be, elegantly on the other side allows them all to kind of coexist in a very comfortable way. So this is just by way of saying that I know there's been a lot of thought and a lot of scrutiny and a lot of really wonderful presentation diagrams that have gone into this. So just wanted to congratulate the team for a very, very effective presentation. And like Laura mentioned, very excited to see this as a, when you're going down, heading into the Longwood, this has always been a very kind of underwhelming location. I think the excitement of what's going to come is very exciting for the district. So thank you.
I still have a few more comments, but can I think I have all of my comments basically on C1. I think there is a comment about the soffit that already came up today. And I really think that's something that is a really good opportunity. We even just go to a site plan and you see all of the overhangs that are dashed in. There's a lot of soffits to think about. And you were one of them. Sorry, Emily. We had you going back and forth so much.
Too many drawings.
And I think that material that you have at the Vicolo might not really want to be the same material that's on the underside of the soffit. Like that might want to be something really special unto itself. And I saw your soffits on the C2 building, and I was like, it takes the coloration of the material and puts it underneath, which could be a fine approach. And then Emily, the front porch has that lighted ceiling, and I just wonder if that, I don't know what the answer is. I don't want to pretend I know what the answer is. I just wonder, is that light effect really helping with the cohesion of the approach? Like maybe it doesn't have to be lit from above. Maybe it's lit from below. But there is something to think about in pulling all of these buildings together from the undersides of the ceiling.
Great point. If I could just add, is there a way then that can also speak to what's happening on the ground plane? So just imagine you've got the ground plane and then you've got this upper piece. So not just how do they relate, and how to Damien's point, how can that be a kind of common language that ties it together, but does not mean it's exactly the same everywhere. It can vary in places like the Vicolo for good reason.
And even where you can see where the front porch, the C2 and C1 overhangs all come together. I'm like, is it a lighting strategy that, they all incorporate a similar approach? That'll be interesting to see how that ends up happening. And then in C2, I think the building has really transformed, and it's very handsome. If we can go to slide 51, I noted slide 51, and actually I saw it in the model. But you could see you could see that there's a penthouse screen enclosure here that's pretty effective, but it's not effective on the Pilgrim Road side. And I just wanted to know, is that a screen? What's happening up there?
Our strategy was to push as much of the mechanical to the side to minimize the shadow. So it's biased in one direction compared to the other. The intention is to have some screen because there will be a lot of equipment up there eventually. Sure. And I think just having just a little bit of a screening element to bring it all together so it reads like a recessed volume versus every single piece of equipment being visible. We think it's quite effective. I think whether the color needs to get a little bit darker or if it needs to get a little calibrated, I think that's definitely to be further developed.
Yeah. It almost, okay, I'm going to throw an idea, and I shouldn't do this, but I am. If you imagine this and getting taller at this point, and then getting taller in that rear point on Pilgrim Road, those are the only 2 points that you really need a higher, wall to conceal the materials, the penthouse equipment. And I'm just wondering, is there something that could be more dynamic with how the red skin ends rather than being straight? Is there like a little high point at one corner and at the other to mask the equipment? It's just, I'm throwing it out. You don't have to think about it, but I do think you need to think about the enclosure a little bit more and resolve it a little bit more. Those are my comments.
One more thing. I know we have to move on, but just as I look at some of the renderings of the buildings as ensembles, I'm just wondering about the datum, sort of where can you, and maybe it is happening and I'm just not seeing it, but, is this the same level datum, and because we haven't, for good reason, we're seeing these as perspectives rather than elevations, but I think that's another subtle mechanism that I can definitely see on the building, the building C2 facing Pilgrim Road. I can see that, but I'm looking for that continuity across all the buildings that are part of the development. And again, it does not have to be literal, it can be suggested. I think that's the piece that would help to begin to unify them. And the more I think about it, the role of C1 as being kind of the upfront rather than background, still being respectful to the surrounding context.
We did spend quite a bit of time massaging each building, and Emily has.
They do align. The short answer is they all do.
I would.
Even R1, we moved the standards so that they align.
That's something this model is very telling to me. When I see the other existing buildings, I can see those various datums, and I think that is, again, how it begins to kind of knit together an urban landscape.
I have a quick comment about the Vicolo too, if you don't mind. Just that perspective that we were looking at earlier that Mimi had commented on. I think Mimi's comment is right on. I just wonder, to Laura's point, if the texture of the second floor soffit stays the same, but as it comes down, that the actual texture doubles or triples, so that there's a kind of a gradation of the way the detail comes, because I think the thing that's disconcerting is that the detail doesn't break down as it gets closer to you, and it feels very heavy as you're on top of you. So, thinking about that one vertical surface, maybe going to a different scale, but keeping the same shingling, but just breaking down the scale a little bit might help that transition. The other thing that was very effective, I thought, on R1 was the idea that the glass was allowing that interesting kind of infinity to the way it was working. So the other idea was that this surface becomes something different so that you do see that plane going through. So it has the illusion, because I think as you're coming down the street, the promise, I know that that's been taken away now that the glass is gone, but it was very interesting illusion that you created originally. But I'm just thinking there's different ways of dealing with that transition. I do think Mimi's right on with the idea that it does feel very compressed very quickly. And is there a way of breaking that scale down to allow it to transition a little nicer? Thank you.
Well, commissioners, we're at about an hour and 10 minutes on this project. So perhaps before handing it back to you for next steps, just a reminder to all participating that as of January 1st, 2026, BCDC is accepting live public comment only at a project's introduction. So for this project, as this is the fifth session, We will not be taking live public comment today. If there is any additional public comment, please email the Planning Department project manager or bcdc@boston.gov.
All right, but commissioners, we do need to make a recommendation here. Sorry, I keep trying to turn on my camera.
I will make a motion to approve.
Second, all right, I am going to call on everyone. Jonathan Garland,
It's recused.
we still need him to say he's recused, I believe, just to get quorum.
I'm recused.
Well,
Yes, no?
I think because they're out of the room, they don't need to.
Okay.
respond.
Shauna Phillips,
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Yes.
Catherine Morris,
Yes.
David Nagahiro,
Yes.
Laura Solano,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
You, our recommendation is for you to proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Yes. So as we reset up the room, we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll rejoin at 6:30.
There's two for the commission.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Half of the room is moving.
Put this on the
Oh, there we go.
Okay, can folks online hear us now? Laura?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Great. Okay.
All right, commissioners, we're back. All right, so, we're moving on to the West End Library. This will be the third presentation for the project to the commission. It follows an introduction on March 4th of 2025. Although it's been a while, the commissioners that were at the last design subcommittee include Jonathan Garland, David Assine, Anne-Marie Lubenow, David Nagahiro, and Laura Solano, and myself. That happened on November 18th. I think since then, Commissioner Garland is recused from this project, and the planning department staff that has shepherded this project is Megan Richards and John Stewart Fishback. And with that, I think we're going to turn it over to the proponent
Yes,
to present.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners, everybody else in the room here and online. My name is Andrew Stebbins. I'm a senior associate at CAT, and tonight we will be presenting the updated design of the West End Library development at 151 King Street. Next slide, please. So I'm presenting on behalf of the architects. We have two architects. We're CAT, the architect of record, and the design architect of the design group. Joining me today is a co-development team, Preservation of Affordable Housing, or co-op, and Cash Capital. And then to my right here is our landscape architect, Gigi Swallenstall, representing G2 Collaborative. So I'll start off reviewing what we heard last time and talk about what we responded to, look at some materiality and library facade updates, and then I'll hand it over to Gigi to talk about the landscape and site design. Next slide. So you see the overarching reason for this project on the screen here. Just a quick reminder, this project was born from a 2023 RFP by the city with the goal to provide affordable housing and a new West End Library branch going from 17,000 to approximately 20,000 square feet. And I think the slide's a reminder of the project's unique location, and it looks to bridge various disparate conditions, not only in the neighborhood, but also our immediate surroundings. There are taller, more institutional buildings to the west and north, and the smaller scale, more traditional fabric, immediately to our east of the Lotus House, historic New England, and Beacon Hill to the south. So as we move forward and develop the design, we kept this in mind and really looking to advance the design with these things in mind. So as we look at more very site-specific images, just keep this sort of overall aerial image in mind. Next slide. So the project is addressing many important goals within a very tight footprint, just a reminder. So we have about 10,000 square feet of library to accommodate, a resident entry, those pesky required critical infrastructure things such as electric rooms, transformer rooms, and fire protection rooms, all while also trying to carving out meaningful exterior space for the library and the community. And then once you leave the ground plane, the manipulation and the mass and expression materials also addresses many factors that I sort of kicked off with the overall view. So number one, we're looking to relate to that diverse scale of the built fabric from large-scale institutional buildings, that you see on the left, to the adjacent historic buildings. We're looking to prioritize and locate and express the community spaces in both the building and the surrounding site. So that's the yellow, which is the library, and also the blue elements, which were purposeful on facing in the facade. And then create distinct expressions for massing elements to break down the scale and reinforce the idea of constructing fabric with different pieces coming together. So you can see we sort of split the massing, which could have been quite bulky, to the advantage of creating two elements and also creating an outdoor deck for the residents on the top of level 5. Next slide. that's a little bit about the development and an overview. So really, these metrics haven't really changed. There's 119 units on the 14-story building, 12 levels of residential over the two-story library, and obviously resident entry. There's one little minor adjustment to this program, which is the bicycle parking spaces, slightly reduced by 4. It's actually a nice suggestion by city staff and BTD to open up some more possibilities at the ground plan, which, as I mentioned before, we're trying to address a lot of issues in that. Next slide. So I guess first we'll recap what we last heard at BCDC. So really, the commentary was quite consistent overall, and I think we're looking to summarize the 3 major topics herein. I mean, there's a lot of other great sort of detailed comments, but overarchingly, there was a concern that the color palette and the architectural expressions were perceived as less cohesive than the earlier schemes. Multiple architectural languages and material expression were noted as contributing to more institutional character. Then there was a comment throughout about facade clarity and hierarchy. The facade proportions and color relationships were noted as reducing the contrast between the elements, making the hierarchy of the frame and the infill less visible. And then thirdly, although the library scheme was generally praised, there was multiple comments that the portions of the horizontal band and the lack of a strong corner was contributing to that element not being able to sort of visually support the frame above. So from there, we are actually directed to not do an additional subcommittee meeting. We're directed back to the city staff, and so the last 4 or 5 months we've had many great meetings set up by the city staff and with the various stakeholders. And the next slides are what we're looking to propose. And a lot of it's really related to simplifying and making more cohesive, simplification and more cohesive design. So I think the next slide might be a little easier to read just because you can see before and after. So we greatly reduced the color scheme. So in the realm of making it simpler, like the very first scheme, we didn't go all the way back to one color, but we did reduce it down. Because before we had sort of 3 or 4 colors happening between the library, the front tower, the 3 to 5 area, and then the back tower. So we really simplified that right down to the 2 color schemes. We have a lighter color scheme where the library and the front tower can relate and speak to each other, and then the darker colors in the 3 to 5 level 3 to 5 in the rear tower. Another great improvement, I think, was just simplification. So, and really understanding frame versus infill. So we took the previously sort of complex vertical frame elements, which were sort of varying in size and profile as you went up the building, simplified that, increased the horizontal frame elements, created a top cap for the tower element, and really worked with the colors to really express the frame, the infill, and the fenestration. And you'll notice the fenestration as well. I think part of it was the rendering and part of it was potential color selection, but you can actually read the fenestration now. You can see that there are windows. You can see that it's a residential project if you look at the images from the left to the right.
And just to know, you're about half time.
Thank you. Then we have a slight, yeah, you go to the next slide. So another minor element at the corner here where the elevator line, we actually reduced that height, so we let the frame read. You can see that much better in this element. But here's a sample of our proposed materials. You can see the cream color ACM and the corrugated, and then the burgundy and the corrugated relating to the brick. So allowing the basically sort of this L-shaped sort of interlocking two elements that are definitely responding to their individual elements. You know, the library has a presence as a library. The masonry facade at level 3 to 5 in relation to the Otis House, and then going to the alternating materials on the frame above. Next slide. Just a reminder, we didn't really make a change here, but here's the contemporary looking masonry that we're proposing for 3 to 5. City staff said it was very important to maintain that through the design and our various pricing iterations, so we'll have that in mind. Next slide. So I'll hit upon the library facade a bit. So really easy to see here. So I think it was Commissioner Steen and mentioned that it might be good to bring back the corner. I think you can see that the addition of the corner and also the increase of the horizontal element really lets the library sort of carry the elements above. Next slide. So here's sort of before and after. Thank you, Nate, for doing that. That's you can see the improvements here very clearly. So in addition to the limestone elements that have been updated and revised, we've also worked with BPL and the city on the canopy design, the signage, and making the sort of entry more real with a book drop and you know, accommodating a vestibule and all those things that really make the project work. Next slide. Then we're asked to look at the ceiling plane. We're proposing to do a faceted ATM, which kind of relates to what the design we're looking at for the canopy of the library to tie those two pieces together. And then at floors 1 and 2, we're actually proposing an upgrade to a concealed fastener box rib panel, just to those areas that are in within touch and visual range will be a little more refined than the corrugated panel above. Next one. And then here's the materials of the library. We have 2 types of granite, one for the base of the nice limestone, and then one, the darker one for the elements for the planters and the courtyard base. You can see the updates here with the signage and the canopy a little more clearly. You can see that faceted design, which we're going to look to carry over to the residential soffit. And then finally, just a real quick note that we did review the fence design. So we landed on a 6-foot fence. Final design has not been determined, but we see as an opportunity to create a custom art element that will tie back to the library's mission of the West End's history. And then I'll now hand it over to Gigi to talk about the site stuff.
Thank you, Andrew. Just to remind everybody, the kind of overall diagram of the site, that we have a lot of different things going on in a very small site, lots of different uses all coming right up against each other. And next slide, Nate. And this is the plan where it stands, and we'll zoom in, but just wanted to show you this overall so you can see along almost the top, the east side of the building, so you can see the whole extent of the site. Next slide. All right, what we heard when we were last with you all were comments about or concerns about pedestrian safety and service access, so vehicles coming in and out of the site and when that would happen and how. Definitely everybody still has on their radar screen this the relationship with the Otis House and their open space and what that will hopefully be. And in general, the planting, there was an ask for more planting, especially at the southwest corner where it says highway easement over on the left there where there were bike racks. And then just discussion about the entry stairs and the west side stairs, which are on the left, and some discussion about consolidation of planters on the east side. There were questions about the night landscape and the lighting scheme and how that was going to be working. And then there was a request for cast-in-place concrete paving at the library front and the residential entrance. Next slide, please, Nate. So the service, the vehicular access to the site has been clarified, and that is really that there's pretty much nothing that comes onto the site except for in when there's a need to get to the transformer room at the back, which would be very infrequent. All of the other, trash, moving operations, deliveries, all of that is actually remains out on Cambridge Street. The plaza, you can see that our relationship to Otis, we are still keeping our site open and kind of welcoming to the relationship with Otis House, and POA is continuing to coordinate with Historic New England on what is happening on their site. For the landscape and entry experience, you can see we've added planting off of that southwest corner of the building. We've removed bike racks from there to get a planting bed in that location. The stair configuration, the west stair and that south stair remain the same. It's very tightly tied to grading constraints because of how Cambridge Street falls from the right to the left on the screen. And the sidewalk is already exceeds accessibility. So how we tie in with that is quite tricky. And up on the right-hand side, we've consolidated planters and bike racks. The site lighting, we'll show you a rendering of that, but we are working on a comprehensive plan that's being developed to keep this a safe and well-lit open space. There will be security cameras also. And then the paving at the library entrance is now cast in place with some sort of a score pattern to it. We do still have large format pavers at the residential entrance on the right, but we've reduced the contrast in those. They were higher contrasting colors before.
TG, 1 minute.
Okay, next slide, please, Nate. So this diagram just is how everybody's getting in and out of all the various entrances, and I'm going to go fast. Next slide, please, Nate. And then layering on top of that, how the service components, and again, that vehicular service green arrow is pretty infrequent. It's really for transformer access only, but you can see library van and trash dumpsters, which we are certainly happy to get into in more detail in a few minutes if anybody wants. Next slide. This is just that rendering again that's showing from Cambridge Street. And then the next slide, please, is the nighttime rendering, which is really just highlighting at this point that we're looking at fixtures that wash surfaces as opposed to having a lot of really visible fixtures, and trying to create out in the landscape a consistent kind of even glow to the site so that there aren't kind of dark hidden spots. Next couple of slides, we can literally just flip through these. We had talked last time about having some use diagrams. So we did a series of these that you've probably all looked at. Keep going, Nate. Just flip right through them. I don't want to go over time, but those are all the different scenarios, which again, if anybody has questions, we can go back to those.
I'd love it if you could just do that really quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Can you go back, Nate, to the beginning of those? Great. So this would be the everyday scenario. The sidewalk is actually widened from what it is currently as you come from Otis House on the east and move to the west. And so we feel as though traffic moving around, there's that large granite block wall at the Otis House that says pedestrian traffic coming along Cambridge Street will be, there'll be better flow of foot traffic there. And you can see the various routes to the front door of both the residential and the library itself. And this has, all of these have on them the bike lane on Cambridge Street, which is raised 3 inches from the vehicular traffic, and then there's also then a 3-inch curb from that bike lane up onto the sidewalk. Next slide, please. And this just shows the library van. We are making sure that there's just enough room for that van to be able to get up onto the sidewalk for book deliveries, and then also the library needs some maintenance access, so that van will be there every day at some point. We hope not for very long, but we are, we wanted to really make sure that we got those 2 street trees, so we've just squeezed that in. Next slide. And just the idea that there's this open plaza on the side that the nice thing about having that curb cut is that you could use it for a special event. So you could get a food truck in there, or you could, there is that access point absolutely needed and could really support some fun programmatic things in that space. Next slide, Nate. This is just moving in and out. There would have to be staging kind of within the building or on the site, and then the truck is on the street and for quick load. We hope it can happen. And then the next slide is what trash pickup looks like. So it was important to the library folks that the rollout dumpsters that come from towards the back of the building, that those not block the library van space, because it could be at the same time of day, even though trash pickup will be at low traffic times. We needed to make sure that we could get dumpsters staged while also leaving that spot for the library van. So that's trash pickup, and I think that's the last one. Speed round.
I think, well, with that, commissioners, we can open it up to comments. We don't have a model, so anyone can raise their hand or unmute themselves and start the conversation. I'm happy to start, Ben. Yeah, I think this is a great project. I think we've actually been excited about this project since the beginning. I think there was a lot of conversations the last time in design subcommittee about the complexity of the entry drive. I think you've solved a lot by having all of the deliveries and vehicle access along Cambridge Street. I do think that'll come with some logistics, but I trust BTD and the design team to work through those. But I think the building itself is very handsome. I'm glad that the color palette continues to be something that you're focused on. The detailing, looks really exciting. I think it's going to be a great project. So I just want to, commend the team for working through all of our comments and continuing to wrestle with the ground plane and all of the logistics. Maybe there's 2 really super nitpicky comments that I have, and it really, Gigi, the last site plan where you were showing the materiality of the ground plane.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's a little disappointing that you went to concrete, and I assume it might be for value engineering reasons, that the entrance to the library, it was
requested of us.
Okay.
Yes.
It just seems like such a nice opportunity to take those stairs and have a plateau that is a little bit more formal than the actual sidewalk. That's what that's more.
Right, which if we're really pushed to concrete for Townsend Place, we would try and at least score it differently, but we would prefer to see more like what we're doing at the residential entrance, which is, a large format paver, but you can get some color contrast.
Maybe there's something a little bit more special about that,
keep the conversation going.
Concrete mix. Maybe there's a little sparkle dust or something that you could put in it to make it seem a little bit better than just concrete.
Great.
And then the other, it's just more of a question than a comment. The bike racks beyond the gate, the service drive gate, are those for the public? Like, who uses those?
Those are residents, and any guests of residents would be able to, they'd be able to open the gate for them to use those. But that's why we, really want to make sure we kept forward, and we have a couple down at the street still. As I get the kind of continuity strip along the street, I think we ran into the library pickup, library van, and trash
Mm-hmm.
That's squeezed out, some more of the bike racks that have been there before.
It just seems like a place that's not going to be very accessible to the public.
Yeah.
And so I was just
Yeah, not
curious
for
about
regular
that.
libraries.
So that might be something to continue to
Yep.
think about. How can we get at least a couple more spots? But I see that Catherine has her hand raised.
Yes.
Catherine, you want to?
Good evening, everyone, as the sun is hitting my face. So on this slide and page 34, 35 as well, just some understanding the kind of public realm open space. I see the what do I want to call them? The barricades, if you will, that are there. And I'm wondering, for events, for small vans that want to get into there to park, or food trucks, are they going to have to go up on a sidewalk, or is there a ramp I'm not seeing that allows for smaller vehicles to turn in if they're going to service that area for an event? I'm just trying to.
Yeah, there is a curb cut there, and there will be bollards. They're pretty faint on this, but there are three. I don't know whether, Nate, you can cursor point those out. There are bollards there, and one or two of those would be removable, and that would be managed by POA. You know, the ability to lay those down, or we're not sure yet whether they're a lay down or a retractable or a pull out, but those would be moved for driveway access.
So if I'm a small business that's been hired as a food truck to come in, I'm coming down the street and I'm turning, am I going on the sidewalk to get to those ballards, or is there a ramp there?
There's a curb ramp, but you're having to, or a curb cut, but you're having to cross the sidewalk there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it a curb cut or more of a mountable curb?
Well, that's true. I guess it is a mountable curb now that the bike lane's there, so it's a 3-inch and a 3-inch. So it's already just curved. Yeah.
I think one of the things that, you know, we worked a lot with this proponent team and BTD and disabilities was really discouraging vehicles from turning into this, right? Because we found that the swing of most vehicles would wind up not only blocking and affecting one lane, but affecting two.
Yeah.
There was a lot of debate about, do we bring trash and other service vehicles into this alley? And I think for a variety of reasons, safety being among the top of them, we really wanted to expand the public realm, increase safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so most of the loading activity is meant to be from the street, and then on very controlled occasions, right, when management is able to organize it, would vehicles come back into that rear space. And the area that's currently parking for the Otis House has in mind future renovations that are not yet fully baked enough, but the idea is that this would not necessarily be parking for Otis House in the future.
Mimi, I have a question. Can you go back to the image with the comparison of the before and after on the Cambridge Street elevation? And first of all, I completely agree. This is a really good project, and I think that the after is in your words, a greater clarity. And now that I'm looking at it again, I like the fact that the building got lighter. And I think that the relationship to the Otis House is really important. But it's really important at the base of the building, and bringing the lightness up through those top 8 floors, I guess, I think really helps a lot. I wanted to go back here because I wondered, and now I'm not sure, so I'll say it anyway, but I wonder, you made the point that there was a clarity between the frame and the background of the frame, or the panel of the frame, or inside the frame. And I wonder if you need that one extra color on the tower, on the top 8 floors. And maybe you do, now that I look at it again, maybe you do, because I do think there is a greater clarity. I think the frame reads much stronger on the right. And if you took that, call it a dove gray away, you'd probably blur it again, and that would not be good. So I'm gonna And actually, now that I look at it more closely, what you actually did was you kind of reversed what happened on floors 2, 3, and 4, and softened what happened on the top 8 floors, the color and clarity. And that's really a nice change. So I think that David Hasine's comment about the corner was a good one. The building really does want to come down to the ground on that corner. The visual sense of a lot of weight above. So I think I wasn't here for the last meeting. I was here for your first one, I guess. And I think you've responded to the comments that you related from the last meeting very well.
Can I say a few things about the site plan, please, for the site plan? Oh, we have to look at it from a different direction. No, that's great. Either way, it's fine. It's good for me to keep my brain busy. But this actually is sort of helpful, because one of the issues that I have with walking down the street from the top side is the chance that you're going to hit this half concrete, half brick. And I know that the idea of this, you could pull it back, which you might not want to do, or you could pull it, and maybe you're leaving that for the library parking truck, but the other thing could be to just have a consistent band along the edge of the street, a consistent brick band along the edge, because I think there is an awkwardness when you're coming along.
I think that happens twice. It happens in the corner you're pointing out, and then it happens on the end too, when you just got this little sliver of brick.
Yeah, unless the sliver, what I was saying is maybe the sliver goes all the way along too, if you want to just have a brick, but either way. How much of this paving is permeable?
Not determined yet. I think especially in the kind of access lane and the open space along the top there, imagine that could all be permeable.
Yeah.
I think obviously at the residential entrance you're undercover, so not so much. But I think out at the library entrance, I think it's the perpetual accessibility to the technically accessible. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, I was nodding my head with you. I knew where it was coming from.
Yeah.
The answer. I guess that what I think is that the whole passage along the service lane seems to me a missed opportunity. Because if it's only really being, it could be used for special events, but I understand you need it. I don't know if you've pushed the limits of what the transformer truck needs. I mean, does it also have to be a fire truck? Does it have to be fire truck access?
It doesn't have to be.
So those guys are moving really slow. So I would try to push it as much as possible. I know you want to keep the Otis parking lot open, but maybe there's a possibility of putting an island along that edge so that it feels more like a green space, like you're moving through a green space, if you can. And then I think once you get behind the gate, maybe you really start having fun with that. Like maybe that becomes some sort of resilient surface, that there can be play space or painting like games on the ground or, different things, because it is, it's a residential project. This is affordable too, affordable project in the city, probably a bunch of families. And, having some play space that's directly associated with, with your building, I think would be really important. And obviously it has to be designed in a way that it can allow the transformer access. I don't know how emergency, if you could move stuff out of the way or not, if there is, but still, I think you could really sort of play with that and develop that a lot more, both that in terms of its permeability, but really in terms of its programming.
Nice idea.
So those are my main comments.
I have a comment, but Laura's hand is up. So Laura, you want to go ahead?
Yes.
Otherwise, Laura's going to have to start learning sign language. You're all going to have to learn it too.
What makes you think I don't know? So thank you for the presentation, and I wanted to ask something, take the discussion that Shauna just had a little bit further. So previously, that corridor was being kept open for service uses, whether they're trash cans or, you know, something to do with the you know, mechanical for the building. And so none of that is going to take place anymore. Is that right?
No,
Except for the
still,
mechanical.
yeah, and the dumpsters get rolled out from the kind of back half of the building as well.
Yeah.
Series of dumpsters.
But if they're rollable, they're relatively small.
Yep.
So I do have to ask, so if you've limited that, why isn't there more green space along that?
I don't know, Nate, do you have the 12-foot lane diagram? We had another exhibit that was
Yeah, that shows.
Yeah.
Right. So what we did do was consolidate with that 12-foot required service access. We played around a lot with sliding that closer to the building or further away, and where you had the kind of what's left, which you can see is more like about 8 feet.
Yep.
And we found that when we broke it up and split it on both sides of the service lane, it felt you just couldn't get a kind of robust enough scale of planting. They just became these little slivers that I think within that space felt small. So we consolidated that with this kind of social eddy space on the building side and pushed the access lane all the way to the property line.
Right. So I get
all the way through? No, but you have the diagram of it going all the way through.
I don't know whether when we, you know what, if you go, Nate, to the let me just see if it's on the overall, the zoomed out. If you go back to the full site plan. Yeah, it's on that very first, there we go, that one.
Got it. So a question, do you imagine that residents would use that space? Like, you were talking about flexible spaces. So was that imagined to be sort of back a house or someplace that people could occupy?
Back where to the left of this image where the service vehicle access becomes kind of gray, we don't envision people using that space because it is all kind of the access lane. So we don't envision people there. Okay, I get it. So, but there are, if you look at this diagram, for instance, on top of that service vehicle access, maybe there's, you know, a place to get some green that, you know, from afar you'd see it behind that. Behind we are trying to plant that side of it. You can see here in the plan, we're trying to plant as much as we can along that edge. There's actually part of Otis House, there's a big historic granite block wall there that we wanted to do some low planting in front of. And then even further back, that's actually I believe it's an MGH building, but where they've asked us to keep off of it a little bit. So we have planting going in there as well. So we're trying to maximize the green back there so that it's there's some relief to the paving. Well, you're coming to something else that I'm a bit concerned about in front of the library, which is the smallness, the thinness of those planters, and then also cutting benches into those areas. You have benches in the building, and I don't know that you need the benches that are right across from them, that are in the, you know, the passage area. And I do think it's important to give passive seating in these kinds of places so somebody can wait, right? You can't wait by the front door necessarily because you may not be seen by your Uber. But I'm wondering if you could
think about removing those benches that are in the planter to give a little more breathing room for the planting, but also think about on the public side of that, to make that, 12 inches wider so that it could be someplace for people to sit. Now, I know that that has a gradient to the top, right? You're striking it level, and because of the way the paving works and the grades in front of the building, that it goes from larger to smaller. But I don't think that's a problem, because you're also talking about kids, right, who could use a smaller height bench. But I would encourage you to think about that, so that there's a little more public waiting room, hanging room in that area. And maybe even if you're going to narrow the beds as you do, maybe the ends of those just become big blocks, So, and maybe this can go up it can go up a little bit. If you wouldn't mind going back to the plan for just a second. So, maybe these areas become solid so that you can, face out either way. But a minor thing, but I think sort of makes it a little more neighborly as well. And then looking at that 12-foot diagram, I'm wondering if the planter beds leading to the residential and next to the residential entry, if those could be made wider, again, for the same reason, just to give plants a, fighting chance. It's the curse of the city, right, that you just don't have enough soil volume. But I really appreciate what you've done over on the right side out of the secured reading garden, because I think that has double effect, which is it'll be nice for people in the garden, and also just a nice way to kind of frame down that entry into the library. And I would second thinking about whether or not the pavement in front of the entrance itself, so the sloping up piece and then to the boundaries of the steps, if that might be made a better looking and, richer pavement. But other than that, I think you've worked with a really tough space, really tough, with a lot of competing interests. And so I think it's going to be terrific. And just a few more dials to turn, I think. Thanks.
Can I just make one statement that just sort of follows?
Sure, and then we'll pass it to Kirk.
Which is that I actually, you said you weren't imagining that backspace to be active, and I think that you should imagine that as your backyard, because I think it's in the way that you have your secured secret library garden. This is the secured kids play garden, and I think it's really obviously you have to get the transformers from it, but it's really a pretty amazing opportunity, because it's safe and it's sort of fenced away and it doesn't have to have the same sort of formality.
Same program as the front does, yes.
And Mimi, can I add something to that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes. Just going back to the paving issue, also just looking at the introduction of concrete, and it seems a little arbitrary in terms of where it happens, so maybe that can connect to the crosswalk. But I'm just looking at that neighborhood. Brick has so much to do with the identity and character. And is there an opportunity, maybe as you follow up on some of my colleagues' suggestions about the space that are off the immediate public realm, to reintegrate some of that color, just to begin to subtly knit the two together, so this doesn't feel quite like it's just dropped in as something very different. And I think that's a really wonderful opportunity for some texture and visual interest, and ways to also pick up the fact that the building too is toggling between brick and concrete.
Kurt, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. No. I think first of all, the comments around the public realm are spot on and been very comprehensive. So all the discussion of what is a fairly limited public realm in its own right, I think are great and should be taken to heart. So I think I'll take us a different direction, and that is just to say, and maybe pick up on some points that David made. This building's trying to do a lot. It's trying to mitigate many datums, lots of chromas, many different vintages of surround, and I think the changes you made are actually excellent. Especially from this view, I think it's a much better, comprehensive organization. And I get what you're trying to do, and I think you'll keep refining it. So I don't have a lot to say except to say it's an important project trying to do a lot of things in a very critical place in the city. And I'm very supportive of what has been done to make it better and the things that have been suggested. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Any other commissioners? All right. Here in the room, if you just go to your opening slide with the view of the city, I think the next time you present this, you have to put the Mass General building that's going in, because that is really missing in this view. And they'll pick up on some of the colors and textures, but just wanted to make that comment. We don't have public comments today. My computer died, so I'm just looking at the front of the camera. But commissioners, if we don't have any other comments, we do need to make a recommendation. So if I can have a motion.
I'll move that we approve to send to the board.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to call on each one of you. Donna?
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubenow?
Yes.
David Manfredi?
Yes.
Catherine Morris? Might be
Yes.
muted. Thank you. David Nagahiro?
Yes.
Laura Solano?
Yes.
Kirk Sykes?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And with that, our recommendation from the commission is to continue on to the board. So congratulations. Thank you. Very nice project.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to invite the 45 Townsend team up. And I know we're running a little late here, folks, but we are close to quorum, so if folks have to leave, please let us know.
So I'm recused, do I need to come back? It would be great if I didn't. If nobody's, I'll wait.
Yeah.
I'll wait, you can text me, I'll just wait over the transfer.
Thank
5
you.
minutes.
Appreciate it.
And have them read it. Yeah, great. And the windows are great for the inside. You really like it.
And do you guys have, are you sharing your presentation as well?
Yeah.
Okay, and I see that Commissioner Garland has returned.
Correct. Should we get going? I know there's,
Yeah, so you need to log on to Wicked Free Wi-Fi and join the Zoom meeting, but actually I think we may have your material pulled up. Lizzie, do you have the 45 Townsend? Okay.
and we'll have planning department comments first,
Yes,
and then the presentation, and then urban.
this is the one that was sent to us about an hour before the meeting. And yes, we will start with planning department contracts.
All right, excellent. I don't have much to add other than we're on to review a new project, 45 Townsend Street in Roxbury. The planning department staff that has been reviewing this is Zhang Young-Ju, James Valentine, and Scott Slarski. I believe some are with us today. Thank you. And we're going to have planning department present some comments. The proponent will present their project. We'll have some urban design comments and then public comments. So just be mindful as we try to wrap up this evening within the next 45 minutes or so. I'll pass on to the planning department.
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, Commissioners. Ted Schwartzberg, Assistant Deputy Director for Planning Review, and as folks know, I usually join to help present new projects. So I'll present a little bit on the planning and zoning context. This is a former hospital facility that hasn't been in use for a few years. It's on 4 lots, but this is considered one project. The zoning here is the Townsend Street Community Facilities Subdistrict. And in Roxbury, we have community facility subdistricts primarily for traditional land uses that were schools, hospitals, and other institutional uses. And key to the review tonight are that the dimensional caps are at 45 feet and 2.0 FAR, and multifamily use, which is proposed, is an allowed use. So the proponents are here to present a project that follows all of our zoning regulations. And as the commissioners are reviewing this, I'm happy to chime in if you have any questions about where the zoning limits come into play. And then about the neighborhood, this is in the fabric of Roxbury. So this is primarily triple-decker, three-family wood frame homes to the north, which is on the right side of the page, and to the left of the site is one small cluster of multifamily residential that exists and directly abuts this site. Next slide, please. And just to situate you in the neighborhood, and sorry, it might be a little hard to read, but this is very close to some great transit resources. So this is walking distance to Jackson Square with Orange Line and MBTA bus service. So that's in the upper right or upper left corner of the image here. And then just off the image on the upper right side is Nubian Square that has a lot of bus service. And then this is just off of Washington Street, and the bus 42 runs up and down Washington Street. And something good to keep in mind as you review the site slides that my urban design colleagues have prepared is to think that this is a very urban condition with a lot of transit resources, even though right now the buildings sit in a sea of parking. So with that, I'll hand it off. Is it Seth or June that's presenting next?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. So yes, this is a former hospital site with very challenging topographic conditions with elevation changes of approximately 40 to 50 feet, with the low end at Townsend sort of rising as you go left on page. There are inaccessible natural areas with a lot of ledge and cliff conditions, large areas of impermeable vehicular surfaces today, and sloped conditions along building edges. There is vehicular access from both from Townsend Street. Other access points, Harrishoff and Denison Street, are to be pedestrian and or emergency vehicle access only in response to resident concerns. And with that, we've concluded our preface slides. Lizzie, if you could bring up the proponent presentation. And team, you have 15 minutes to present. And just ask for next slide to advance. See if we can get that larger on page.
Let's pull it up. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your time and consideration. My name is Ted Davis. I'm the project manager for Kensington Testa Company. I'm joined by Steve Morrell, who's our lead architect, and Michael Bryan, who's our landscape consultant. With this project and this new design, we've taken a very different approach. We had a lot of feedback from the community. This area is home to the Garrison Charter Neighborhood Association, as well as MEK Association, and a very vocal IAG. So we took all their comments from the previous designs and used that really to guide this updated design. One of them that they requested was a zoning compliant project. They wanted a maximum of 166 units. which is aligned with the surrounding zoning density. They wanted one-to-one parking. They wanted they wanted to minimize construction impact on the neighbors. So this property is full of Roxbury pudding stone. So the previous design would require a lot of blasting, which is something the neighborhood did not want and the community did not want. So that was definitely something to give into consideration. They did not want any access to Denison, which is on the back side of the property, and they did want pedestrian access to Herreshoff. No vehicular access, just pedestrian. So taking all that into consideration, as well as economic considerations, the cost of construction has gone way up, materials are way up and all that. We started looking at, well, how can we achieve everything they're asking, still make something make sense. We looked at the hospital. The infrastructure is sound, very high ceilings, big concrete structure, wide floor plans. So we decided to take a look at if we can reuse this building. And so that led us to an adaptive reuse with some additions to really make this project work. And with that, I'll leave it to Steve to kind of walk through how the design evolved.
Thank you. My name is Steve Morrell. I'm the lead architect. I just wanted to kind of reiterate what was said about the neighborhood. We're in the, the neighborhood is bounded by some large, important city thoroughfares, but our site sits, pretty much in the heart of that. But Townsend Street itself is an important roadway that traverses the neighborhood, and so we have kind of a prominent location. It also shares the street with Horatio Harris Park, but I think that park with its paths and meandering around Pudding Stone kind of will speak to how we're going to be approaching our project. Next slide. The neighborhood context, as it was stated, is a lot of 1- and 2-family homes. There are a multitude of multi-family apartments in the neighborhood. Most of them are all in brick. Lots of windows, 3 to 4 stories. That kind of speaks to a little bit of what our project will end up being. The top 3 are really one across the street and next door, so you can kind of see what the context of what we're working with. Next slide. So this is the existing conditions of the site. It's a new 2-story building that is functionally designed for hospital use. For the hospital, parking was prioritized, so there's a vast amount of asphalt. Entries were inside the lot, and there was nothing on the street. Exposed ledge in the rear of the site, as was explained. And the building doesn't really fit the scale of the neighborhood, so we'll have to, that's something we'll have to take a look at. Next slide. This is a little bit of a site analysis. The challenges we're going to keep the site is the steep slope comes up from Townsend to the rear. It is difficult to traverse, especially when considering accessibility. And the building access is limited to really where the building can reach the site. But there are some bins we have to reuse. The height of the building and the terrain allow for really beautiful views of the city. The existing structure doesn't require a ton of effort to transition to residential. And the limited construction impact on the neighborhood during construction, given the amount of open space that we have, there won't be much construction with the neighbor. Some challenges for the adaptive reuse that we'll be addressing is currently there's no access to the building from the street. It's difficult to park on the steep grade. Of course, accessibility will always be an issue throughout the entire project. And the ledge is, a concern that we have, but with the adaptive reuse approach, it's kind of minimize the need for very much removal. Next slide. This is a section of the property that cuts through the primary building. It's really just for a diagram, but we can get an idea of where we are. Section tells the story of site access and how we need to take advantage of the architecture to facilitate the movement through the site. There are important locations where the floors of the building intersect with the site. So at Townsend Street, on the right of the building, on the right of the slide, the ground floor aligns with the public pedestrian way where there are direct opportunities for residential community interaction. Moving up levels in the building and moving away from the street, the intersections being on the left connected with neighborhood interaction on the street, which creates a sort of tiered layered organization that can focus more on the resident-only areas. Next slide.
You're just over halftime.
So let's look at the building, the history of the site. Primarily, we're kind of highlighting the buildings that we'll be using for the property. There's a hospital on the site since 1929, but most of those buildings are no longer there. And we're dealing with buildings that were built in the 50s as well. The addition in the back was built in 1987. The warehouse building is not highlighted in the back. That's something that was coming down, and it was built in 1966. And we're dealing with a dormitory building over there, which is really already situated for residential use, a little bit ahead of the game. All of this has not been in use since 2014. Next slide. So how do we adapt an institutional building to multifamily residence? We talked about the zoning 2 lots, so we're kind of looking at one building on each of the two lots we have. The demolition you see in red is areas that are challenged to adapt the building. There's one structural bay on the first level building, extension to allow light into the interior to make the footprint more conducive to residential. Single-story boiler rooms that will be removed that aren't very usable for what we're doing. The warehouse building itself will come out, but it didn't work anyway because of the fact that we only have one building on the site. And we're going to have a smaller, newer one-story addition. We're moving a one-story addition that's in the interior part that has on piers in the courtyard that really isn't very useful for what we're doing. The additions to the site, you can see them outlined on this slide. The 2-story part of the first level building, we see the 3rd floor is addition to aligning with the rest of the surrounding building. There's also a 4-story addition with widened and narrow spines to provide a 2-inch unit in the courtyard. Primarily, we're adding a 45-foot 4-story addition to the dormitory. There's parking underneath and access to pedestrian bridge, which provides access to the highest point of the site. We'll be adding a lookout amenity. One other significant item is the removal of the perimeter fences that are there now. That will allow the project to better blend in the neighborhood fabric. On that slide. So this slide shows the breakdown of the building and general view. All 664 units are rentable, and we are providing an array of interior amenities to the residents. The addition of the building completes an access strategy via a complete campus that allows movement to different areas of the site, particularly taking advantage of the closed pedestrian walkway connecting the two buildings. Here, though, we can see the layers or tiers that can be used to organize the site. Along Townsend, there is a landscape area with a small garden that creates a sort of front porch to the property where there can be interaction between the residents and the neighborhood. There are units with direct street access in this area, as well as primary entrance to the development. We've introduced street trees, which enhances the streetscape and provides some curb appeal that was missing from the time it was without the hospital. As we move back into the site, you can see site enhancements and gardens that have different levels of indirect access from the street, as well as others that are more private. Next slide. Here we can see how the layer and tiers are starting to be implemented. The elevation shows a clear view of how the building interacts with the site. Along Townsend, you can see where the building entrance and ground level units can access the gardens on the street. The facade is organized with new materials to contrast with the brick to present a human scale of the street. Where there was once a building that turned on the street, we're now opening up to the street. On the south elevation, you can see a tier at the lowest building entry. This tier pulls back a little from the front porch, like interaction at the front of the building, but still maintains a level of community interaction. For example, there was an accessible parking there's accessible parking for the building here, there's also parking for car share vehicles and be accessed by anybody in the community. The entrance at this level opens to a primary amenities for residents. However, there are also these community activity rooms that can be used by neighborhood residents. The design of the building uses large glazed openings into the residences to allow light into the spaces. The existing hospital strip windows made the interior of the building somewhat dark, so we're trying to alleviate that. We were, however, cognizant of the existing building, didn't want to lose much of the building design and history, and we left much of the existing masonry exposed throughout. Primarily, we are enhancing the existing masonry with the use of horizontal wood siding and metal panels for action. Next slide. At the B building's new addition, you can see how we continue to use the large glazed openings, providing ample lighting to the residences. And at the main A building, along the profile of the site contour, the tiering of the site is very visible as it moves back from the street and engages the building. Next slide. So the first set of slides shows the front of the building with the street trees, and you can see how it contrasts with the existing nature of the building. We're trying to kind of work with the shapes and the form of the building, but we're introducing some new openings and some new ways to kind of engage the interior of the building with the exterior. Next slide. More renderings. The side entry at the first tier with a ramp moving up from the street to this tier. I just wanted to point out the power lines here in these existing conditions. We will be having to. There will be power lines. The renderings don't show them, but we're going to have to address them. We're going to have to be careful with as we go ahead with the design. We'll have to be cognizant of them, especially as we design the street trees and things of that nature. Next slide. These are views in the rear of the site of the kind of dormitory building. You can see that the existing building is kind of a patchwork of different types of materials, and we're kind of trying to create a cohesive design with the landscaping and the architecture. You know, as you can see, we're kind of creating a small oasis in this neighborhood with the landscaping, and you can see that we are presenting that there. Next slide. These are just some views of the main entrance off the street and the enhancements we're making to the streetscape. I just want to point out the section there that's kind of institute building, which is kind of the key cog and where the building is being used. It's an existing one that we're going to rehabilitate. Next slide. You can see the site improvements in context on the site plan. No yellow entry point to provide access to the array of paths and the sidewalks that meander around the site, similar to the way we're kind of mirroring the way that the ratio park shows a similar thing. And you know how we're going to meander array around with putting stone hill crossing.
And about 2 minutes left.
So I'll let you go and talk to you.
Next slide, please. So I'll be very quick, just reorienting you all to the site with a bird's eye view. Again, the strategy for the landscape comes as these tiered systems which emerge out of the need to grade the site in order to meet the interests of the building. So one of the important things that we wanted to emphasize is this idea that there's this kind of interface between the front of the building, which we are kind of considering the porch, and then as you go further into the site, you have then the more private secured residence. The strategy for the actual site is keeping and completely free of fencing and allowing for kind of full maintained connectivity to the residential fabric, which means that your security comes actually through accessibility. Full site accessibility is acquired through the building, which means that that public interface in the porch becomes the front area where community and residents are able to come together, especially with the introduction of street trees and what I'm kind of considering our freestone continuity of material, which kind of continues the interface of putting stone frontages around the neighborhood that go all the way up to Horatio Harris Park. And then also in that first tier, the parking lot as well, where community rideshare and bike-share access will be. As you go further along into the site, then that becomes more private access. Next slide, please. And then kind of going and reorienting back to those views, that front three images, top left, top right, and bottom left, consider the front view of the site from Townsend Street. So this, again, is really where the public interface comes on. The front image at the very top is in front of where now are the Norse's dormitories. So those will be more lawn conditions for the site. And then as you move along, more spaces to linger where, again, in these front entrance gardens, here are opportunities for residents who are living there to use the space, but also a lot of people walking to use this area. Again, Townsend Street is very visible, so the opportunity to slow moving traffic and also provide shade during the warmer months. And then as you progress further into the site, in our bottom right image, as you can see, you have more of a reclusive space for residents to take care of an outdoor amenity, which will also pair with the garden space and then the overlook that situates itself at the back of the site. And then in terms of surfaces, a lot of work is being taken care in order to reduce asphalt on the site, with more opportunities for infiltration into grassy knolls and also places in the parking lot to also think about retention there for water. Next slide, please. If you can finish up. Yep, and then lastly, just considering planting for the site in order to contrast kind of some of the standard beige of the materials, really thinking about bringing color into spaces where the front is situated in the darker purple in order to kind of navigate folks along the site, and then bringing flowering species and new conditions into the site where you can see in the lighter purple the shade of where new plantings will happen. Everything else is considered existing or residential access. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, and we'll turn to staff slides very quickly. So as we bring those up, of course, adaptive reuse presents challenges and opportunities and requires thoughtful and site and building design strategies to achieve an accessible, welcoming and well-integrated development within the surrounding residential neighborhood and building off the architectural integrity of the existing buildings. We are very much interested and have started talking with the proponent about enhancing the legibility and the prominence of the entrances, especially from Townsend Street. The development's primary public entry should better announce itself along the Townsend Phase. And we're also looking particularly at the larger addition to Building B. Can the siting and massing of that addition be configured to improve the resident's entry experience, create additional landscaping space, and reduce the visual presence of surface parking? Next, please. Of course, this is incredibly challenging from an accessibility standpoint, as Michael and team were saying. How can the accessible routes along the site's topography be designed as a sequence of meaningful experiences for residents and visitors? The Townsend Street front yard, which the proponent has focused a lot of time on to, I think, solid effect, should continue to be publicly accessible with access to the building and units lining the street. They do have ground floor units there. There are some very nice underwire street tree plantings and reconstructed Roxbury pudding walls, which we feel are strong elements, and we feel like this can be further developed and sort of wrapped around some of the key public edges as this develops. Outdoor amenity spaces, wanting to make sure that we clarify and understand the intended public versus semi-private or private character of each, the dog walk, the gathering decks and gardens, and further study the pedestrian desire from Hershoff Street terminus to various resident entries. Next, please. For the adaptive reuse of the existing building and site, really looking to better understand the distinction between what is existing and what is new. And really, can the architectural solution retain the legibility of the existing architecture and allow the new volumes to read as distinct? And we'd love, as we continue to work with a proponent, to explore strategies where existing fenestration, materiality, and architectural details are discrete in their relationship to the proposed additions. With that, turn it over to the commissioners. Maybe, Lizzie, we could go back to the proponent's presentation.
All right, commissioners, I'm without my laptop, so feel free to raise your hand on the Zoom call.
I'm sorry if I can interrupt because we are nearing quorum. May I make a suggestion that we make a motion to vote now, just in case one or two people drop off?
Absolutely. So, commissioners, I need a motion to send to subcommittee or another motion you would like to make.
Make a motion to send to sub. Sorry.
Thanks, Kirk. And I'm going to assume that David is second. So with that, I'm going to call on everyone present. Jonathan Garland.
Yes.
Shauna Gillis, Shauna is recused from this one. Anne Marie Lubenow. David Manfredi.
Yes.
Catherine Morris.
Yes.
David Nagahiro.
Yes.
Thank you. Laura Solano.
Yes.
Kirk Sykes.
Yes.
And myself, yes. So at a minimum, you're going to go to subcommittee, but we do want to give you comments that you can work with the planning staff on in the next time between our meetings. So with that, Kirk, thank you. Would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. And also, thank you for addressing a building that's been a bit of a blight on this neighborhood for quite some time. I have the unique experience of having had our daughter live across the street when she went to UMass Boston with a bunch of roommates. And so I know the site very well. And a couple of my comments come out of that knowledge, which hopefully you can address some of them. First of all, Townsend Street is an extremely fast street, and I don't know what traffic calming you will bring to bear but in the macro public realm, where your main entry on Townsend for vehicles exits is also a very difficult blindish corner. So I don't have an answer for you. It's more a statement of the current circumstance. The other thing is would be about the lighting strategies along the front yard and how you will animate that. The buildings across the street that you showed are fairly dense apartments populated by a lot of people who are young in them at the moment. And so, you know, there, in terms of eyes on the street, I think we want to think carefully about who's home, who's out, who's at school, and how are you trying to secure that front yard. And then my last comment before I turn it back to my fellow commissioners is maybe about hierarchically prioritizing facades. You know, this building has sat here for so long in its current condition that it's begging for a statement of rebirth. And it still feels very institutional, mostly because of the massing to me. But I feel you may do some more creative and innovative things, say on the Townsend Street facade, and maybe on the facades where you have more vegetation and screening. Maybe that warrants a slightly different approach. So I guess I'm looking to encourage you to differentiate the different masses in their treatment as they present themselves to very different conditions in their context. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. Can I just ask that we go to a different drawing? I think, Lizzie, you have control, and I just want a site plan where hey, that's great. Why don't we just leave it here? Go ahead, David.
So I'm going to pick up exactly where Kirk was. I wonder, given the scale of surrounding neighborhood, and it's mixed, I get that. There's triple deckers and there's duplexes, and then there's some multifamily 3 or 4 story. There's a lot of different things, but this is the oddity by far. And I wonder if your approach shouldn't be first of all, by the way, I should have started with this. This is incredibly ambitious. And I applaud you for taking this on. And I'm sure that, I don't know, I never knew this building existed. I've never heard that name before, and I'm happy that Kirk knows it so well. But like a lot of these medical healthcare kind of things, everything kind of gets connected and congealed to everything else. And I want to, without thinking on greater scope, because I understand that it's going to be, this is going to have lots of financial constraints around it. I wonder if you don't take on strategies of how you separate the pieces, because it feels like you're touching every surface, which is ambitious, but necessary, but they're staying very congealed. They're staying very similar as I wind my way around all of these different facades. And I wonder if you don't take a strategy of saying, there's 4 buildings here. There's the one that's labeled, and I don't know, you might say it's 5 or 6, but there's the dorm building addition, which is the new building. And then there's what's the other one? The dorm building. And then there's one on Townsend. And then that one that says main building is actually 3 buildings. Yeah. And when you put the dates up, they were actually built at different times. I wonder, I'm not trying to demolish anything. When I say pull it apart, I want to pull it apart visually, not tangibly. And instead of using 3 or 4 materials and colors and textures all around it, pick out one material and texture on building 1 and a different one on building 2 and a different one on building 3, and proportions of windows, because you have, when you showed the black and white elevation, my first reaction was, oh my God, there's so much going on, I can't understand that. And then when you showed it 3-dimensionally, I got it. You know, the elevations aren't helping you, but I got it. I got what you were doing. You were creating bigger openings. You were getting rid of the ribbon windows. You wanted it to feel of a more, less institutional, more domestic proportions of solid to void, all good things. But I wonder if there's, and I'd love to see when you come back, show us a typical floor plan, that where the entrance is, where the cores are, how many cores, I can't figure out how many cores there are, but I'd like to know. And I wonder how many entrances there should be. More maybe creates other security issues, I don't know. But I'd like you to think about visually separating the pieces without demolishing anything. I'm not saying make separate buildings. I don't want to add elevators. I don't want to add stairs. I know that's going to get you into all kinds of financial constraints. But I think there's an opportunity because you're touching every surface. So let's think strategically and say there's 5 buildings here, and think about it as 5 buildings. Not that there has to be 5 entrances and 5 cores, but you visually use the exterior building materials to fit better into your surrounding context. And I completely agree with the comments that Kirk also made about, the site is almost compelling you to separate these parking levels out and build those retail. That's a good thing. That's helping you. And it's helping you get scale in there. And so I think you can push that even farther. But this is a very big undertaking and not easy. But I think there's real opportunities to do something really special.
Thank you, David. I'm going to pass on to Jonathan Garland.
Excellent. Evening all, and I just would absolutely build on both Kirk and David's comments, and more poignantly to David's. I also applaud you for taking on this is a bold endeavor. I think the very first slide showing just the grading and the topography is a challenge, and then on top of that, the adaptive reuse challenge is equally something to understand. And so I also think that some of I think the biggest challenge is going to be what can you do to kind of dismiss the iconography of an institutional medical use and counterbalance that with a residential place or a village or a place where people can look and feel and act as if they're at home. And so almost like if you were to pull out a blank, piece of trace paper and imagine that this site were not already an institutional campus, what a housing development might look like. It might look like multiple buildings with, as David pointed out, decent amount of space between buildings. And what I mean by that is even looking at the dorm building and its addition. I think perhaps, seeing some daylight through that, between that and sort of the main larger building, could be something that you study. Not saying that you go there because you may have some operational constraints to that, but at least seeing in subcommittee as it goes forward, the ability to understand why not, you might be able to go there. Because when I look at one of your slides that showed like the pedestrian bridge that you see along Townsend Street, that alone starts to really get me thinking again back into that institutional realm. I don't know if you have a pic. I think you have one of your slides that shows it. But just taking elements like that and asking, does that really fit what feels like or could feel like a residential place to be? And then also establishing a punch window rhythm or rhythm again that feels like a residential. I think in some of the elevations, the sill went almost to the floor. I think in a living condition, you may have the sill a bit higher, so you can almost put a sofa or something up against the exterior wall. Just really challenging and disciplining yourself to see, like this image in the lower right with the pedestrian bridge. When I look at that, I'm still feeling institutional and medical use campus. So what can you do along the lines of really pushing the envelope to get this thing to feel residential? And I don't think it's just architecture. I also think it's the landscape. I couldn't quite get a full grasp on the open spaces or what I would call qualitative open spaces. And just because there's a plethora of surface parking today, I don't know that you have to keep that same ratio of parking. That's probably a larger multimodal question, but can there be buildings that have directly adjacent open spaces and backyards and multiple backyards to, again, not to get rid of the large medical building with a sea of parking concept and bring it into a residential space. It's a big challenge, but I think the discipline of challenging everything that's on the site and looking at it through the lens of economics as you have to, but also through design to see, does this fall into the civic institutional court or into the residential court, and seeing how that might help the design.
Thank you, Jonathan. Laura Solano, and then I'll pass it on to Catherine.
I believe Catherine was before me. Catherine, do you want to go ahead? Otherwise, I'm happy to do that.
No worries.
Sorry.
I know it. It's getting past our bedtime. It's totally fine. I want to double down on all the commissioners. I want to lift up. I love ambitious projects. I think that's what defines our city and our neighborhoods. And given that this is in Roxbury, the heartbeat of Boston, it's a building that's been sitting for a very long time. So you have community that has experienced this building and many variations of decades. Generations have moved throughout, and there's a real remarkable opportunity to signal the future with this place. And so, to the points around, there's ways to move from this being a medical facility to being one that not only the people who are living in it, but those who surround it, feeling proud about where this building and the space is going, whether that's the art itself or what you plan to do with the massings, but there's a real creative opportunity to create to signal the future for this community that's going to be with this building for a very long time. And I just want to lift up for you all to think about, whether that's the facades themselves, or any other aspects around the space, but you have a real creative moment, and a historic moment in this community to make a difference. Just want to lift that up.
Thank you, Catherine. Laura?
I am on this commission. I'm always lamenting the lack of topography, and I think I have met the challenge. You have met the challenge for sure. This is such a difficult site, and in all aspects, the buildings, the topography. But I would encourage you to kind of reverse how you're thinking about this and use the topography in really powerful ways to have the building respond to the topography, not just the topography responding to the building. And I saw in those, in those sections that, you've got stepped portions of the building. But I wonder if there's another way to think about this. And it has to do with the cross section that is perpendicular to the long axis of the building. I wonder whether or not there's some way to, as Jonathan said, kind of flip the narrative of the green space being closer to the building and getting that to coagulate around the buildings. I think it will make the buildings stronger. Now, I understand that I'm asking for a lot, but I think the place to begin is to come back to us with a plan that shows us exactly what the grades are in each of these levels, because right now there's a lot of terracing going on the site, and it's almost as if the parking is trying to navigate over that. But I don't really understand where walls are, where spaces could be connected, or whether or not they're disconnected, and they'll never be connected. But there's tremendous opportunity. But just as an exercise, I suggest you sort of reverse and think about the topography as being a driver. and then come together with the building and the topography, because you in this kind of project, you cannot ignore either one. There's no smoothing out that topography with the grades that you have. But again, just helping us to understand how that's working here will allow us to give you much better comments, I think, on this, and make the process of, meeting with the commission go more smoothly. The other thing I wanted to ask is the number of parking spaces. How many are required or allowed by zoning? And, so how did the numbers come to be with the parking?
Yeah, so it's 124, that's a 0.75 parking ratio. It's actually a real point of contention. The neighborhood is requesting 1-to-1, and that's been the biggest opposition in the community meetings, is they want more parking. We initially did have more parking. We've scaled it back because of that parking ratio. So we're going to have a hard time doing any less than what we have.
Yep.
And technically, Laura, I think Ted was going to jump in. The community process notwithstanding, which is very important, but the zoning allows the ratio to be determined through the ADB process. So the ratio is what staff come to conclude. And we also appreciate the community conversation that's happening out there.
Yep. So how many spaces are there?
124.
Do we know?
And how many units? I'm sorry to have such a short memory, but it's it is really close to my bedtime.
164 units.
Say it again.
164.
164. Okay, thank you. I think that I think I've said enough. It's hard to comment except in very broad ways now. But again, bring us back a plan that shows building entrance elevations, so finished floor elevations, elevations of the parking lot. And by the way, I'm not asking you to bring back a grading plan. Spot grades would do it, just to kind of get a sense of what's going on with the site. So thanks very much, and thanks for taking this on.
Laura's comments are great, and I would encourage you, and I'm really not trying to spend your money, build a model.
Yeah, I would
It could be
agree.
really simple.
Yeah.
It could be chipboard. It could be styrofoam. Because I feel the same way Laura does. I don't understand the grade.
Yeah.
And I think what she's getting at is really important. And it's the simplest model. Massing. Don't worry about elevation. Get the massing, the relationship of the buildings to the site right. And you can make it really dumb and simple. We'll understand it.
I think that's sort of what comes to my mind as the number one thing, is figuring out how to represent this as simply and clearly, and we understand economics as a piece of this for your design costs, but help us and you understand the relationship between buildings and landscapes. I was also thinking, is there the ability with the technology today to create also a series of building plans so that you see the landscape that's immediately adjacent? So I absolutely, a model would be fantastic, but some way, because I also really was taken, David, by your comment about, how do you think about the buildings, and are there ways, I guess in my mind, there's a little bit of the imagery or strategy of, how do the buildings relate to the landscape? How do they relate to the neighborhood? How do we translate something that has been institutional into something that speaks to its new residential purpose, that relates to the neighborhood? I'm a little agnostic at this point. This is what I'd love to see you explore about. Does it then sort of recede, or is there also an opportunity for this to be like a village on a hilltop or something? I think because you're at the beginning stages, there's opportunity to explore it, but absolutely understanding the grading, how that affects entrances, and then also just understanding the broader strategy of legibility of entrances, hierarchy of entrances, how you move through the landscape, what is public or not, and just having a little bit more clarity as to where the ledges are. I've been looking at Google Earth, trying to figure out but where the ledges are, where you're clearly getting clear direction from the neighborhood or the residents about access points, parking, and I'd like to understand a little bit like what's driving their insistence on one-to-one, and is there some room for negotiation with better understanding about how the site will be used and who will be, what's the unit mix? We haven't talked about the mixed unit. So, does that affect the demand? And then also, so thinking about precedents, just are there precedents out there that you can look for? And also, how does that then inform the cladding of the building that I see? I think there's some bigger, broader design moves to make first, but how do you then, think about recladding the building to achieve your intended design and vision site? But again, applaud the fact that reuse and how important this is for the neighborhood of Roxbury.
I'll just say, I think you're hearing comments in two categories. The simple category is, we are so confused about this project, and it's a communication drawing effort that we need your help in guiding us through that conversation. I even think something simple as naming your building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or name it the dorm building, the pedestrian building, whatever you want to name them. We just need to be able to name buildings. So it's really just an information piece. I also think the ground floor plane, if this was a flat site, we would definitely ask you for a NOLI plan. What's happening on all the first floor levels as it hits the exterior grade? This one, you might have to have 2 or 3 plans that kind of cut through to show us where your amenity space is, where's the public activation versus the exterior, just so we understand what's happening at the ground plane. So one is just pure information. I think, David, you're right, the elevations were I was like, whoa, what am I even looking at? And so we just really need to understand graphically what buildings we're looking at when you're showing us drawings. So that's just the information graphic comment. I think you're also hearing comments about how you distinguish each of the buildings that David, you started, and I really support that. To be very simplistic, this is, the dark building, and this is the light building, and this is the horizontal window building, and I don't know how we distinguish it, but I think it might be helpful for each building to have a different characteristic rather than the blend that you've done. Everything kind of looks the same, and it even makes things more confusing to navigate. I think there's something that could be really special with the space in between. It seems like you have to have cars in that center zone. I don't know if that's true or not, and we could keep cars to the perimeter and have only green space in that center zone. Would that help you think of that dorm building addition in a different way, different angle, for instance? These are questions that I have, but I think we need more information, and we need you to help us parse out these buildings before we can get to that level of discussion.
And I would add, I pay attention, particularly the view on the right. I think use that as your guide as you develop whatever your model, your plans, because what I really like about it immediately, I'm still grappling with what's the context around it. We all know generally it's a neighborhood. You showed us general examples of the typology, but there are different conditions around each side, and I think it's really important that you maintain that information as you continue to develop your responses to it, and I think that will also give you cues as to how you differentiate between different assets. I'm really struck by the two, if I understand correctly, Townsend Street. There are these two kind of longitudinal buildings that have sort of a sense of formality to them. So just there's some, I think, just some simple analysis of how, going back to help us understand what's going on in each building. No doubt they have some different characteristics as well. And how does that begin to inform some of your design moves? Doing a lot of adaptive reuse myself as an architect, that often begins to give you clues as to what's possible or not possible, where things you maintain continuity versus where you have differentiation.
Can you go to slide 17, Lizzie? I just also want to just say that I think there was a very smart comment, I think it was by you, David, that not every surface has to be touched. I think, you know, maybe Townsend becomes your most important elevation. There's something charming about the characters of the original buildings that I actually like, that I'm not sure I would, you know, try to go against them so hard. Maybe lean into some of the characteristics of the buildings, and then spend the dollars on the ones that are really more public facing. But Laura, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I have a very quick comment, just as you all have talked about the buildings, and, you know, I think you were talking about an OLI plan. Think about the landscape that way too. So when you come back to us, don't bother with putting trees on, just do green versus paved. And that will help us a lot. Because otherwise the trees are, you know, they hide things, they're distracting. It's so simple is good.
Okay. Should we
Yes,
turn to public comment before?
Yes, we have to turn to public comment.
Okay, Lizzie, do you have those? At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and we will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function, and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep comments to 2 minutes. I believe I see one hand. Oh, that's Laura.
That's Laura.
I'm going to lower Laura's hand. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute public comments? Okay, not seeing any. We will close public comment.
We voted.
Seeing as we have already voted, we will see the project again in subcommittee.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, we're not done. We have one more vote, and that is to adjourn this meeting. If I can have a motion.
So moved.
Second. All right, I will call on the remaining commissioners. Jonathan Garland.
Yes.
Anne Marie.
Yes.
David Manfredi.
Yes.
Catherine Morris.
Yes.
Laura Solano.
Yes.
Kurt Sykes. And myself, Mimi Love, yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us this late into the evening. I thought we had good conversations this evening. Productive comments.
Well done, Mimi.